Hello friends. Welcome to the DxD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was betrayed and reborn as the true Shadow Monarch, solo leveling. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Shadows of Betrayal. The candles flickered in the underground chamber beneath Kuo Academy, casting elongated shadows across ancient stone walls inscribed with symbols older than human civilization. Issei Hyodo pressed his back against the cold stone column, his breath catching in his throat as he watched the scene unfold before him. The familiar crimson hair of Rias Grimori shimmered in the candlelight as she stood at the center of an intricate magic circle, her usually warm expression replaced by something colder, more calculating. "Are you certain this ritual will work?" Rias's voice echoed against the vaulted ceiling, lacking its usual melodic quality. Something about her tone sent ice through Issei's veins. Akano Himahima, still dressed in her school uniform, unrolled an ancient parchment covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift under direct observation. The text is clear. The sacrifice of a sacred gear user, particularly one housing a dragon, will amplify our powers tenfold. Her normally playful voice had taken on a clinical detachment that Issei had never heard before. The timing must be precise. The celestial alignment occurs tonight. Issei's fingers dug into the stone behind him, hard hammering against his ribs. Sacred gear user. Dragon. They could only be talking about him. Kaneko stepped forward, her small frame silhouetted against the ritual circle. "What about Issei Senpai's feelings for you, Bushu? He trusts you completely." Rias waved a dismissive hand, and the gesture felt like a physical blow to Issei's chest. "Sentimentality is a luxury we can no longer afford. The upcoming conflict with the Chaos Brigade demon. DS power beyond what conventional training can provide. Besides," Kiba added, stepping out from the shadows with a ceremonial dagger in hand, "his perverted nature makes him unpredictable. A liability in crucial moments." Issei's vision blurred, his sacred gear, the boosted gear, manifesting unconsciously on his left arm, the green gem pulsing with his accelerating heartbeat. "Partner, something is wrong. Their auras are corrupted." Diedrag's voice resonated within Issei's mind, uncharacteristic concern evident in the ancient dragon's tone. "I know," Issei whispered, barely audible. "This can't be them." Not really. But their faces were unmistakable, their voices, though altered in tone, recognizable. The people he had trusted with his life, for whom he had bled and fought, were calm. Lee discussing his sacrifice as if planning a school festival. "The ritual requires him to enter willingly," Asia's gentle voice cut through Issei's thoughts. The blonde healer clutched a book bound in what appeared to be scaled leather. "How will we convince him?" Rias smiled, and the expression chilled Issei to his core. "He's besotted with me." A few honeyed words, perhaps the promise of advancement to a higher class devil. "He'll follow me anywhere." The casual cruelty in her tone shattered something fundamental in Issei's worldview. Every moment, every battle fought together, every promise exchanged, every lingering touch, recategorized itself in his mind. Had it all been calculated manipulation? Stepping stones toward this moment. "We should proceed," Akano said, glancing at an ornate timepiece. "He'll be arriving for the special training session soon." Issei's fingers curled into fists, the scales of the boosted gear extending up his arm in response to his emotional turmoil. He could confront them, demand explanations, fight his way out if necessary. But outnumbered 5-1, against opponents intimately familiar with his abilities and weaknesses. "Partner, I sense an ancient magic at work here. Something beyond devil power. Something abyssal." Before Issei could process this information, a sixth figure emerged from the shadows behind the ritual circle. Tall and gaunt, wrapped in layers of midnight blue robes embroidered with constellations, the stranger's face remained concealed beneath a deep hood. "The preparations are complete," the figure announced, in a voice like gravel being crushed underfoot. "But I sense, we are observed." 5 pairs of eyes snapped toward Issei's hiding place. "Issei," Rias called, her voice suddenly honey-sweet, a perfect mimicry of the tone that had once made his heart race. "How long have you been there? I was just about to send Kiba to fetch you." Issei stepped from behind the column, abandoning concealment for confrontation. The betrayal burned like acid in his veins, but he kept his expression neutral, buying time as he assessed escape routes. Long enough, Bushu, he replied, the honorific feeling like ash on his tongue. Long enough to hear that I'm today's main course. You misunderstand, Rias began, but Issei cut her off with a harsh laugh. I think I understand perfectly. He activated the boosted gear fully, the armor materializing around his arm. Boost, boost. Diedrag's voice echoed, power surging through Issei's body. The hooded figure stepped forward, raising a gnarled hand. Fascinating. The dragon responds to emotional distress. This will amplify the ritual's potency. Who are you? Issei demanded, directing his question at the stranger rather than his former friends. A facilitator, the figure replied. A guide to greater power. These children possess tremendous potential, squandered by conventional limitations and, a dismissive gesture toward Issei, wasteful investments. Children. Akino's eyes narrowed dangerously. A poor choice of words, the figure amended smoothly. Young gods in the making. Issei's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. He couldn't fight them all, but perhaps he could escape, regroup, find help. I'm leaving, Issei announced, backing toward the chamber entrance. Whatever's happened to you all, whatever this creep has promised you, it's not worth it. Rias sighed, the sound unnervingly authentic in its disappointment. Restrain him. Issei never saw Kaneko move. One moment she stood beside Rias, the next. Pain exploded across his midsection as her fist connected with his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. Sorry, Senpai, Kaneko whispered, and for a fleeting second, Issei thought he glimpsed regret in her usually impassive eyes. Kiba appeared behind him, ceremonial dagger pressed against the nape of Issei's neck. Don't make this harder than necessary. Harder, Issei wheezed, struggling to refill his lungs. You're planning to kill me. How exactly should I be making this easier for you? Not kill, Rias corrected, approaching with measured steps. Transform. Your essence, your power, will be redistributed among us. In a way, you'll live on through our achievements. That's not how living works, Bushu, Issei spat. The hooded figure chuckled, the sound like stones grinding together. Bring him to the circle. The alignment approaches its zenith. Strong hands gripped Issei's arms, dragging him forward despite his struggles. The magic circle beneath his feet pulsed with malevolent energy, symbols illuminating one by one in a sickly purple glow. Boost, Issei shouted desperately. Boost. Diedrag responded, but something was wrong. The power surged but seemed contained, unable to manifest beyond the circle's boundary. Anti-dragon wards, the hooded figure explained, gesturing at the glowing sigils surrounding Issei. Quite effective, though rare. The knowledge was expensive to acquire. Why? Issei demanded, looking not at the stranger but at Rias. After everything we've been through, everything I've done for you. For me. Rias tilted her head, genuine confusion crossing her features. You've been useful, Issei. A good pawn. But the game has advanced, and pawns are frequently sacrificed for greater tactical advantage. Each word struck like physical blows, but beneath the pain, something else stirred in Issei. Not the familiar rage that had fueled his previous battles, but something colder, more calculating. The boosted gear will pass to another wielder after my death, he said, buying time. You won't gain its power. The hooded figure stepped forward. Conventional death, yes. This ritual circumvents that limitation by harvesting the sacred gear's essence simultaneously with your life force. Akino began chanting in an ancient language, the words seeming to distort the air around them. Asia opened her scaled book, hands trembling slightly as she joined the incantation. Kiba and Kaneko took positions at cardinal points around the circle, their expressions hardening into masks of concentration. Partner, I cannot break these wards, Diedrag's voice had grown fainter. But perhaps. What is it, Diedrag? Issei whispered. There is a presence responding to our situation. Ancient, vast, not of this world, yet, somehow familiar. Rias stood directly before Issei now, her beauty unmarred by the cruelty in her eyes. You once swore to die for me, Issei. I'm merely collecting on that promise. The ritual circle flared blindingly bright. Issei felt something fundamental being torn from his essence, not just the boosted gear, but something deeper, more intrinsic to his being. Pain beyond description flooded every nerve ending. "Arise, Abaddon," the hooded figure intoned. "Accept this offering and bestow your blessings upon these worthy vessels." The me sent a ripple of recognition through Drake. "Abaddon, partner, this is far worse than." The dragon's voice cut off as Issei felt the sacred gear being ripped away, along with his consciousness. As darkness claimed him, a different presence brushed against his fading awareness. Not Drake, something vaster, older, a consciousness that spanned dimensions and epochs. A will that refused to accept this end. Darkness. Not the absence of light, but darkness as substance, tangible, flowing, alive with purpose. Issei floated in its embrace, aware but disconnected from physical sensation. No pain, no heartbeat, no breath. Am I dead? He wondered, and the thought echoed outward through the darkness. Technically, yes. The response wasn't audible, wasn't language as Issei understood it, yet conveyed perfect comprehension. The darkness shifted around him, coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape composed of deepest shadow, 2 points of blue-white light serving as eyes. However, H is rarely as permanent as mortals believe. "Who are you?" Issei asked, though he had no mouth or voice in this place. "I have been called many names across many worlds. The Shadow Sovereign, the Monarch of Death, the Ruler of Eternal Rest." The entity's form fluctuated, momentarily revealing glimpses of battlefields where armies of shadow beings fought under its command, worlds consumed by darkness only to be reborn in new forms. Civilizations rising and falling in the span of heartbeats. "But you may call me Ashborn, though that too is merely an approximation." "Why am I here? Where is Drake?" "Your dragon has been severed from you, consumed by a ritual invoking Abaddon, the Void Walker. An old enemy of mine from before the concept of enmity existed." The shadows rippled with what Issei somehow recognized as contempt. "As for why you are here, you interest me, Issei Hyodo. Your will to survive, your capacity for growth, your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. These qualities remind me of myself, long ago." "What happens now?" Issei asked, a strange calm settling over his formless consciousness. "Is this the afterlife?" A sound like laughter, though utterly devoid of human warmth, emanated from the entity. "This is a crossroads, a moment between moments. You stand at the precipice between oblivion and possibility." The entity extended what might have been a hand. Darkness gathering into concentrated form. "I offer you a choice, Issei Hyodo. True death, peaceful, final, without pain or betrayal. Or rebirth is my vessel, my successor. The Shadow Monarch reborn." What does that mean, exactly? Even in death, Issei remained cautious. His trust had already cost him everything once. Power beyond your previous limitations. The ability to command shadows, to extract them from fallen enemies and build an army answerable only to you. The capacity to grow stronger with each victory, each challenge overcome. Images flooded Issei's consciousness, himself standing amidst an army of shadow soldiers. Confronting beings of godlike power, tearing open the fabric between dimensions with his bare hands. But there would be a cost. Your humanity would be altered, not lost, but transformed. And your path would inevitably cross with Abaddon's again. My power in this world would draw his attention, his hunger. I'd face the thing that orchestrated my betrayal. Something sparked within Issei's formless existence, a dangerous, cold determination. Eventually, yes, and those who betrayed me. The entity's glowing eyes seemed to intensify. They would recognize what they discarded, what they created. Whether that leads to their destruction or redemption would be your choice to make. Issei considered the offer, weighing extinction against rebirth with unknown consequences. But beneath the philosophical contemplation, a simple truth remained: he wasn't ready to die. Not like this, not as a sacrifice for those who had used him. I accept, Issei declared. Make me the Shadow Monarch. The entity's form expanded, engulfing Issei's consciousness. Then rise, Shadow Monarch. Arise from betrayal, from death, from the very darkness they thought would claim you. Pain returned. Not the agony of having his sacred gear extracted, but the sharp, clean pain of rebirth. Bones remolding, muscles reconstituting, organs reforming with subtle but fundamental differences. They sought power through your sacrifice. Knowledge poured into Issei's reconstructing mind. Understanding of shadows as both weapon and army, comprehension of a system beyond mortal design that would guide his growth. Awareness of dimensions folded within dimensions. Show them what true power looks like. The ritual chamber exploded in darkness. Where Issei's body had lain at the center of the magic circle. A pillar of shadow erupted upward, shattering the underground chamber's ceiling and continuing skyward, puncturing through 3 floors of Kuo Academy before breaking into open air. Rias and her peerage were thrown against the walls by the concussive force, the hooded figure alone maintaining his footing at the edge of the devastated circle. Impossible, the figure hissed, pulling back his hood to reveal gaunt features and eyes like pools of oil. The sacrifice was complete. I felt the dragon's essence transfer. From within the column of darkness, 2 eyes opened. Not the warm brown of Issei Hyodo, but luminescent blue-white, like stars viewed through interstellar dust. What have you done? Rias demanded, struggling to her feet as her crimson hair whipped around her face in the unnatural wind emanating from the shadow pillar. Nothing that was not already in motion, the man replied, genuine fear creeping into his voice. Something else has interfered, something old. The darkness began to coalesce, compressing inward until it took Issei's shape, but not quite Issei as they had known him. His school uniform had been replaced by what appeared to be armor crafted from condensed shadow, fitting his form perfectly while seeming to absorb surrounding light. His hair had darkened from brown to deepest black, and when he finally spoke, his voice resonated with harmonics that had never been present before. You wanted power, Issei said, each word precise and cold as he surveyed the chamber. How interesting that in reaching for it, you delivered greater power directly to your enemy. He extended a hand, and darkness coalesced around it, forming into a spear of concentrated shadow. Issei, wait, Rias began, rising to her feet with palms raised in a placating gesture. We can explain. The shadow spear launched forward, missing Rias by millimeters to impale the hooded figure behind her. The man's eyes widened in shock as shadow spread from the impact point, consuming him from within. Servant of Abaddon, Issei stated, not as accusation but as simple fact. Did you really believe I wouldn't recognize your master's taint? The man convulsed, dark fluid leaking from his eyes and mouth as he struggled to speak. You cannot comprehend what you face. Shadow pretender. Issei approached with measured steps, the stone floor beneath his feet frosting over with each footfall. I understand enough. You corrupted my friends, used them to sacrifice me, all to feed your master's insatiable hunger for power not rightfully his. He placed his palm against the dying man's forehead. Now I'll take what knowledge you possess. Darkness flowed between them, and Issei's eyes widened fractionally as information transferred, rituals, dimensional coordinates, ancient pacts, and a name, Matthias Abaddon, emissary of the void. When the transfer completed, the man collapsed into particulate shadow that swirled momentarily before being absorbed into Issei's outstretched hand. Where the emissary had stood, only empty robes remained. A translucent blue window materialized before Issei's eyes, visible only to him. Shadow extraction complete. New shadow soldier acquired. Abaddon's emissary, elite rank. Knowledge transfer complete. System update. Shadow Monarch awakening phase initiated. Current level 1. Issei dismissed the notification with a thought, turning his attention to his former comrades, who stared at him with expressions ranging from horror to fascination. Issei. Asia ventured, her voice small. Is that really you? Parts of me, he replied, studying them with his luminescent gaze. Enough to remember. Enough to wonder why. Akino stepped forward, her expression strangely vacant. The ritual. Something isn't right. My thoughts are clearing, like waking from a dream. Or a nightmare, Kiba added, looking down at the ceremonial dagger in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. What have we done? Issei regarded them silently, new senses perceiving distortions around them, subtle but distinct corruptions in their magical signatures, dark tendrils connecting them to something distant. Something vast and hungry. You've been influenced, he stated finally. But not controlled entirely. Some part of you chose this path. Issei, please, Rias stepped forward, her usual confidence faltering beneath his cold gaze. We would never have willingly harmed you. This man, this creature, he showed us visions of destruction, convinced us the power was necessary to save everyone. You thought sacrificing me was acceptable, Issei finished for her. A rational calculation, the needs of the many outweighing the life of one perverted pawn. He turned away, shadows swirling around him. I need time to consider what happens next. Time to understand what I've become. Wait, Rias reached for him, but her hand passed through his arm as it dissolved into shadow. Where are you going? To test the limits of my new existence, Issei replied, his form increasingly insubstantial. When I return, we'll determine whether what existed between us can be salvaged. Or if it died with the old Issei Hyodo. With those words, he collapsed entirely into shadow, flowing upward through the shattered ceiling and disappearing into the night. Behind him, 5 devils stood in stunned silence. The consequences of their actions only beginning to dawn on them. 3 days later, Issei stood atop Tokyo Tower's uppermost observation deck, closed to the public at this late hour. The city sprawled beneath him, a constellation of artificial stars that could not match the brilliance of the natural canopy overhead. His enhanced vision perceived both with equal clarity, along with spectra no human eye could detect, the flowing currents of magical energy, the subtle distortions around supernatural beings moving through the human world. The knowledge, extracted from Abaddon's emissary, had provided context for his new abilities, though much remained mysterious. The system, a framework that quantified his growth and abilities, appeared as translucent windows visible only to him. Tracking his progress, cataloging his shadow extractions, and offering guidance through his transformation. In the 3 days since his rebirth, Issei had tested his powers cautiously. Starting with minor manifestations, shadow movement, enhanced physical capabilities, before attempting his first extraction from a rogue stray devil he'd encountered in Shinjuku. The process had been instinctive, darkness flowing from him to consume the fallen enemy, reforming its essence into a soldier under his command. Now, with a thought, he summoned that soldier, a twisted, can-like shadow entity that materialized beside him, awaiting instruction. Return, Issei commanded, and the creature dissolved back into his shadow. He had avoided Kuo Academy and its inhabitants, needing distance to process both his transformation and their betrayal. The anger remained, a cold ember in his chest, but tempered by the understanding gleaned from the emissary's memories. Abaddon was ancient, patient, and subtle in corruption. The ritual had required willing participants but not necessarily informed ones. A flare of supernatural energy from a nearby rooftop interrupted his thoughts. Issei turned, enhanced senses identifying the magical signature instantly. Devil, high class, attempting to mask their presence but unable to hide from his new perceptions. I know you're there, he called. Your concealment might work on humans or lesser supernaturals, but not on me. Not anymore. A figure materialized from a teleportation circle, a woman with long silver-white hair that caught the moonlight like polished platinum. Her features possessed an aristocratic sharpness, her bearing regal despite casual attire of black jeans and a leather jacket. Most striking were her eyes, heterochromatic, one molten gold and one crystalline blue, which regarded Issei with analytical intensity. Impressive detection abilities, she said, her voice carrying a subtle accent Issei couldn't immediately place. Most high-class devils wouldn't have noticed my presence until I chose to reveal it. I'm not most anything, Issei replied evenly, studying her with equal intensity. Valeria Lucifer, I presume. Surprise flickered across her features before being carefully masked. My reputation precedes me. The last descendant of the original Lucifer, exiled from Devil Society for political reasons rather than any personal failing, Issei stated, recalling information from the emissary's memories. Considered dangerous due to your bloodline abilities and unpredictable allegiances. A remarkably accurate summary from someone I've never met. She approached with measured steps, stopping a respectful distance away. Though you have me at a disadvantage. You know who I am, but I know only rumors about you. The human who died and returned as something unprecedented. Issei Hyodo, he offered. Former Red Dragon Emperor. Current. Work in progress. Shadow Monarch, she corrected. Watching his reaction carefully. That's what the supernatural rumor mill is calling you. A being capable of commanding darkness itself, of raising shadows from the fallen. Issei's expression remained neutral. News travels fast. Power of your magnitude creates ripples. Valeria leaned against the safety railing, seemingly casual though Issei detected the subtle readiness in her posture. Particularly when it emerges suddenly in territory claimed by devil factions. I'm not interested in territory disputes or devil politics. And yet they're inevitably interested in you. Her mismatched eyes studied him with undisguised curiosity. What exactly are you planning to do with your new abilities, Issei Hyodo? Revenge against those who betrayed you. Accumulation of power. World domination. The options are rather expansive for someone who can raise an army from shadows. Issei considered her question seriously. 3 days of solitude had given him time to contemplate his path forward. But no clear answers had emerged. I haven't decided, he admitted finally. Understanding comes first. Control. Mastery. The rest follows. Valeria nodded, something like approval flickering across her features. A prudent approach, more measured than I expected from someone so recently betrayed. Death provides perspective, Issei replied dryly. Why are you here, Valeria Lucifer? Curiosity seems insufficient motivation for someone in your position to personally investigate a rumor. A smile curved her lips, genuine amusement rather than social formality. Direct. I appreciate that. She straightened, her demeanor shifting subtly. I'm here to propose an alliance. With me, obviously. She gestured dismissively. Not with any faction or family or political entity. Those bridges burned long ago. Just me. And what would this alliance entail? Mutual benefit. I possess knowledge about supernatural realms that your previous associations may have neglected to share. Information about Abaddon that even his emissary might not have known. In exchange, I gain an ally whose power exists outside established hierarchies. Issei considered her offer, sensing no deception in her words though clearly detecting calculated self-interest. And your true motivation, beyond tactical advantage. Valeria's mismatched eyes hardened momentarily. Let's call it recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone else who knows what it means to be discarded by those who should have valued you. To be seen as a means rather than an end. The words struck closer to Issei's core than he expected, resonating with the cold ember of betrayal still burning within him. Yet caution remained. Trust, once shattered, reformed slowly if at all. I'm not in the habit of making alliances with strangers, he said finally, particularly when recent experience suggests trust is easily misplaced. Understandable. Valeria reached into her jacket, extracting a small obsidian card etched with silver symbols. When you're ready to discuss terms, activate this. It will create a secure communication channel. She extended the card toward him. When Issei made no move to take it physically, shadows extended from beneath his feet, enveloping the card and drawing it into darkness. Fascinating, Valeria murmured, watching the process. The control you exhibit already. Most supernatural beings take decades to master new abilities with such precision. I'm a quick study, Issei replied, though privately he attributed his rapid advancement to the system's guidance. CE and the knowledge absorbed from the emissary. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the distant sounds of the city below. Finally, Valeria pushed away from the railing. One last piece of information. Freely given as a show of good faith, she said. The ritual performed on you was incomplete. What you became was not what was intended. Issei's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. Abaddon sought the Red Dragon Emperor's power. Yes, but more specifically, he sought control over you as his vessel. The Shadow Monarch's intervention, a power Abaddon believed long extinct, from this dimension, disrupted that plan entirely. Her expression grew serious. He will not abandon his ambitions easily. What was meant to strengthen him has instead created his most significant threat. He will move against you again. And soon. Let him try, Issei replied, shadows swirling around his feet. Valeria studied him for a moment longer before nodding. I believe I've made the right decision in seeking you out. Issei Hyodo. Until next time. A teleportation circle formed beneath her feet, silver light contrasting with Issei's darkness. One question, Issei said before she disappeared. How did you find me? The smile she offered contained equal parts mystery and mischief. I followed your shadow. With that cryptic response, the circle flared, and Valeria Lucifer vanished. Issei remained atop the tower long after she departed, considering their exchange and the implications of her warning. Abaddon would come for him again. perhaps directly, perhaps through proxies. The ritual that killed him had been merely the opening move in a game spanning dimensions. And the Occult Research Club, his friends, his former family. A notification window appeared before him. Daily quest completed. Survive 72 hours as Shadow Monarch. Reward. Level up. Current level. 2. New ability unlocked. Shadow Domain. Issei dismissed the notification, decision crystallizing within him. He would return to Kuo Academy tomorrow. Face those who had betrayed him. Determine whether they were victims or willing participants. And then he would begin preparing for war. Dawn broke over Kuo town, painting the sky in watercolor hues that Issei perceived with newfound clarity. From his vantage point atop the school's clock tower, he watched students filter into the campus below. Their normal lives continuing undisturbed by supernatural machinations. How fragile their reality seemed now, how easily disrupted by forces they couldn't perceive. He had changed in more than power. The perverted thoughts that once dominated his consciousness had faded to background noise, replaced by cold analytical awareness. The dream of a harem that had driven his adolescent ambitions now seemed childish. Superficial, a boy's fantasy compared to the cosmic chess match he had been unwittingly drafted into. A notification appeared. Quest available. Confront your past. Opening square bracket. Objective. Determine the true nature of the Occult Research Club's betrayal. Reward. Enhanced shadow extraction ability. Accept. Y.N. Issei mentally selected. Y. Then dissolved into shadow, flowing. G down the tower and reforming in the empty hallway outside the club room. He didn't announce his presence, didn't need to. His enhanced senses detected 5 devil ores within, tense with anticipation. They had been waiting for him. He pushed the door open, stepping into the familiar space now laden with entirely new context. Rias sat behind her desk, Akino at her right hand as always. Kaneko occupied her usual spot on the couch, though she sat rigid rather than relaxed. Kiba stood by the window, hand resting casually near the sword leaning against the wall. Asia alone approached, stopping several feet away when she registered the coldness in his gaze. Issei-san, she greeted, voice trembling slightly. You came back. Not as the person who left, he replied, remaining by the doorway. His new senses perceived the subtle magical barriers surrounding the room, protection spells, containment wards, emergency teleportation circles. They had prepared for this confrontation with characteristic thoroughness. We weren't sure you would return, Rias said, her voice carefully controlled though Issei detected the underlying tension. After what happened, after you killed me, Issei finished flatly. Let's not dance around facts, Bushu. Rias flinched at the honorific, delivered without warmth or respect. Issei, you have every right to your anger. What we did was unforgivable, regardless of the circumstances. But please understand, we weren't entirely ourselves. I'm aware of Abaddon's influence, Issei replied, shadows shifting subtly around his feet. His emissary was quite informative before I absorbed him. 5 pairs of eyes widened at this casual mention of shadow extraction. Then you know we were manipulated, Akino said, stepping forward. The artifact H.E. presented. A crystalline sphere he called. Abaddon's eye, gradually corrupted our thoughts, our moral frameworks. Yet you maintained enough autonomy to plan meticulously, Issei observed. To lure me with promises of special training. To discuss my feelings for Rias as leverage. Uncomfortable silence followed his accusation. We can't undo what happened, Kiba finally spoke, his normally friendly expression solemn. But perhaps we can explain, if you're willing to listen. Issei considered this, then nodded once. Explain. For the next hour, the Occult Research Club members took turns detailing their encounter with Matthias Abaddon 3 weeks prior, his arrival bearing warnings of an imminent catastrophe, his gift of the crystalline eye as a detection tool, the gradual whispers that planted seeds of paranoia. The escalating visions of destruction that could only be averted through acquiring greater power. The corruption was subtle, Rias explained, hands clasped tightly on her desk. It built upon existing concerns, existing ambitions. My desire to protect my peerage, Akino's quest for greater magical understanding, Kiba's determination to never again lose those he cares about. And what existing concerns did it exploit regarding me? Issei asked, his voice dangerously soft. The room fell silent again. My frustration with your periodic distraction, Rias finally admitted. Your tendency to be sidetracked by physical attributes during critical moments. My concerns about the dragon's influence on your development, Akino added. The possibility at Dedrag might eventually overwhelm your humanity. My fear that your power was growing too quickly, without corresponding maturity, Kiba said quietly. Each admission struck like a physical blow, confirming what Issei had suspected. Abaddon's influence had worked because it found purchase in genuine concerns, genuine weaknesses in their bonds. And you, Issei turned to Kaneko, who had remained silent throughout. The small Nekomata met his gaze directly. I didn't have concerns about you, Senpai. I just wasn't strong enough to resist when the others decided. Asia stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. I thought we were helping you, Issei-san. The visions showed you consumed by the dragon, losing yourself. The ritual was presented as salvation, painful but necessary, like surgery to remove a cancer. Issei absorbed their explanations without visible reaction, the cold ember in his chest neither diminishing nor flaring brighter. Where is it now? He asked. The eye. Destroyed, Rias answered. When you changed, the backlash shattered it. That's when our minds began clearing, though the horror of what we'd done remained. Issei nodded, then turned toward the door. Thank you for your explanations. Wait, Rias stood, circling her desk. That's all. You're leaving again. What did you expect? Issei asked without turning. Immediate forgiveness. A return to the way things were. No, but, Rias struggled visibly. What happens now? With you? With us? Issei considered the question, genuine rather than rhetorical. What did happen now? The express. Lanations matched what he'd learned from the emissaries' memories, lending credibility to their claims of manipulation. Yet the foundation of trust had been irreparably damaged. I don't know, he answered honestly. I need time, space, to understand what I've become, to determine my path forward. Will you return to school? Asia asked, voice small. No, the answer came without hesitation. That life is over. Issei Hyodo, the student, died in that ritual chamber. What emerged is something else. The Shadow Monarch, Rias said quietly. Issei's eyes narrowed slightly. You've heard the term. Rumors are spreading through the supernatural community, Kiba explained. A new power, a human who died and returned commanding darkness itself. And what does the supernatural community plan to do about this rumor? Issei asked, shadows darkening around him. Nothing. From us, Rias assured him quickly. I've informed my brother of the circumstances, requesting non-interference. He's agreed, though others may not be so accommodating. I can handle interference, Issei stated, not as boast but as simple fact. He turned to leave again, then paused. The apartment above Matsu, Da's family restaurant in the shopping district. If you need to contact me, leave a message there. I'll check periodically. You're staying in Kuo? Akino asked, surprise evident in her voice. For now, Issei glanced back over his shoulder. Abaddon will return. When he does, his attention will focus here, on the site of his failure, on those who participated in his ritual. I won't abandon innocent people to his retribution. Regardless of personal history, the declaration hung in the air, neither reconciliation nor rejection, but something more complex, a statement of principles that transcended personal grievances. A notification appeared before his eyes. Quest completed. Confront your past. Objective fulfilled. Truth ascertained. Reward. Enhanced shadow extraction ability unlocked. Additional reward. Shadow sensing range increased. New quest available. Prepare for the coming storm. Issei dismissed the notification with a thought, then stepped into the hallway, leaving the door open behind him. As he walked away, he heard Rias's voice, quiet but clear to his enhanced hearing. We've created something we don't understand, haven't we? No, Akino replied. Abaddon created it. We were merely the tools. And I suspect we'll be grateful for that creation when he returns. Issei continued down the empty corridor, shadows trailing behind him like an afterthought. The confrontation had provided answers but no closure. Perhaps that would come with time. Perhaps it never would. For now, he had a storm to prepare for. The abandoned warehouse district at the EDG. E of Kuo Town provided ideal training grounds, isolated, spacious, and unlikely to attract attention as Issei explored the expanding boundaries of his abilities. 3 weeks had passed since his return from death, each day bringing new discoveries, new challenges, new levels of power as the system guided his development. Currently at level 7, Issei had accumulated a modest shadow army, 17s. Soldiers of varying ranks extracted from supernatural threats he'd encountered or sought out. Most were low-level, the equivalent of foot soldiers, but 3 elite-ranked shadows formed the core of his growing force, Abaddon's emissary. A transformed stray devil with crystalline armor, and a rogue exorcist whose fanaticism had driven him to unsanctioned devil hunting. In the center of the largest warehouse, Issei stood with eyes closed. Shadows swirling around him as he practiced the most recently unlocked ability, Shadow Domain, a pocket dimension he could create and control, where his power reached its fullest expression. "Arise," he commanded. The shadows solidified, taking forms both humanoid and monstrous. Issei opened his eyes, surveying his assembled forces with critical assessment. Stronger than before, yet still insufficient for what he suspected would come. A notification appeared. Daily training complete. Shadow control proficiency increased. Shadow domain duration extended. Dismissing the notification, Issei returned his shadow soldiers to their dormant state within his own shadow. Training alone had limitations. True growth required genuine challenges, real combat against worthy opponents. As if responding to this thought, a familiar magical signature registered at the edge of his awareness, approaching rapidly, making no attempt at concealment. "Return," Issei commanded, and the shadowy dimension collapsed around him, reality reasserting itself as the warehouse reappeared. Moments later, the metal doors creaked open, admitting a silhouette backlit by the setting sun. Valeria Lucifer stepped inside, her silver-white hair gathered in a practical braid, her casual elegance replaced by utilitarian combat attire, reinforced leather, strategic armor plates, and various magical implements secured to a utility belt. "I activated your communication card 3 times, she stated without preamble. "You never responded." "I've been occupied," Issei replied, noting the tension in her posture. The subtle signs of recent combat, a scratch along her jawline, residual magical energy clinging to her like static. "You're troubled." "Perceptive." She approached, heterochromatic eyes scanning the warehouse. "Your training progresses well. I sense the domain you've been practicing. You didn't come here to evaluate my progress." A smile flickered across her features, there and gone. "No, I came because circumstances have accelerated. Abaddon's agents are moving more openly than anticipated." She produced a small crystal from a pocket, activating it with a touch. A 3-dimensional projection materialized between them, a map of Japan with pulsing red markers concentrated in 7 locations. "Dimensional thinning," she explained, gesturing to the markers. "Points where the barrier between our world and Abaddon's domain is being systematically weakened. They're creating entry points." Issei studied the projection with narrowed eyes. "For what purpose?" "Invasion would be the obvious answer, but I suspect something more insidious. Abaddon doesn't conquer, he consumes. These points form a ritual array on a massive scale." Her expression darkened, one that encompasses Kuo Town at its center. "The site of his failed attempt to acquire the Red Dragon Emperor," Issei noted. "He's trying again, with greater resources. And greater desperation." Valeria deactivated the crystal, the projection fading. "Your emergence as the Shadow Monarch represents an existential threat to him. In all recorded history, only the original Shadow Mona RCH ever successfully opposed Abaddon's consumption of a world." Issei absorbed this information, correlating it with knowledge extracted from the emissary. "You've been investigating these thinning points." "The one nearest Tokyo," she confirmed. "I encountered resistance, specialized constructs designed to counter devil abilities. They nearly overwhelmed me." She extended her hand, revealing a small, jagged fragment of crystallized darkness. "I managed to obtain this. A piece of one of the constructs." Issei took the fragment, shadows immediately responding to its presence, swirling around it with unusual intensity. "This resonates with my power. I suspected it might. These constructs appear to be corrupted versions of shadow soldiers, similar to what you command, but twisted, unstable." Valeria watched him examine the fragment. if Abaddon has found a way to replicate or pervert the Shadow Monarch's abilities. Then the situation is worse than anticipated, Issei finished, closing his fist around the fragment. Shadows enveloped it, drawing it into himself for further examination. You came seeking alliance. I came seeking partnership, she corrected. What affects one of us affects both. Abaddon threatens everything, not just supernatural realms but humanity itself. His hunger knows no distinction between devil, angel, yokai, or human. Issei considered her words, weighing options, calculating probabilities with the cold precision that had replaced his former impulsiveness. Valeria represented an unknown factor, powerful certainly, knowledgeable definitely, but trustworthy. After recent experiences, trust came neither quickly nor easily. Yet practicality demanded consideration. Facing Abaddon alone would be challenging at his current level. Allies, Carafew, LLY chosen and maintained at appropriate distance, offered tactical advantages. Partners, he agreed finally. With conditions. Name them. Complete transparency regarding all information related to Abaddon. No political entanglements with devil factions or your family's interests. And recognition that decisions regarding my shadow abilities remain exclusively mine. Valeria nodded, unsurprised. Reasonable terms. I have conditions as well. Proceed. Reciprocal information sharing. Consultation before major actions that might affect our joint interests. And, she hesitated momentarily, access to your shadow domain for sanctuary purposes if circumstances require emergency retreat. The last condition surprised Issei. Shadow domain represented his most private space, a dimension shaped by his will alone. Granting another entry, even conditionally. Why that specific request? He asked, studying her with newfound intensity. Valeria met his gaze directly. Because I've been hunted my entire life. Issei Hyodo. By my family's enemies, by those who fear my bloodline, by power seekers wanting to control Lucifer's heir. Having one place, one sanctuary, where pursuit is impossible would be. She paused, searching for words, valuable beyond measure. The naked honesty in her expression, the momentary vulnerability in her typically guarded demeanor, resonated unexpectedly. Issei recognized the sentiment, the desire for one safe harbor in a hostile world. Granted, he said finally. Under emergency circumstances only. Relief flickered across her features before her composure returned. Agreed to all terms. She extended her hand in the human manner of sealing agreements. Issei regarded it momentarily before accepting, his enhanced senses detecting the MP Lex magical energies flowing through her, ancient bloodline power, carefully controlled. As their hands clasped, a notification appeared. Alliance formed. Valeria Lucifer. Benefit. Access to ancient devil knowledge. Benefit. Political intelligence network. Benefit. Combat support. Now, Valeria said, releasing his hand. We should investigate the nearest thinning point together. My devil abilities combined with your shadow powers might penetrate defenses that defeated me individually. Issei nodded, shadows already gathering around him in preparation. When? Immediately. Abaddon's constructs seem to operate on a cycle, their weakest at midnight, which gives us 3 hours to prepare and arrive. Where? Valeria produced a detailed map, indicating a location in the mountains north of Kuo town. An abandoned shrine, once dedicated to a minor mountain kami. My intelligence suggests it was corrupted approximately 2 weeks ago. Issei studied the location, mentally calculating travel time and tactical approaches. We'll need to. His words cut off as his enhanced senses detected a massive energy spike emanating from Kuo Academy's direction. Both he and Valeria turned simultaneously toward the disturbance. That's. Valeria began. A dimensional rift, Issei finished, already moving toward the warehouse exit, shadows swirling around him with increased intensity. Larger than should be possible without extensive preparation. They're accelerating their timeline, Valeria concluded, keeping pace beside him. But why? The array isn't complete. Issei's expression hardened as realization dawned. Because they know we've allied. They're forcing our hand, making us react before we're prepared. Or, Valeria added grimly, they're targeting the occult. Research club members, the only ones who've witnessed Abaddon's methods and survived. The implications hung between them as they emerged from the warehouse into the twilight. Without discussion, Shadows enveloped them both, and they disappeared into the gathering darkness, moving with preternatural speed toward the growing disturbance. The confrontation Issei had been preparing for had arrived sooner than expected. Whether he was ready or not, war had come to Kuo town. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Emerging from Darkness. Moonlight filtered through mist-shrouded trees as Issei and Valeria approached Kuo Academy, their forms materializing from shadow at the perimeter. The school grounds, normally peaceful after hours, now pulsed with malevolent energy. A fissure had torn the night sky above the main building, not merely visual distortion but a literal wound in reality, edges ragged and weeping darkness unlike Issei's controlled shadows. That's not a standard dimensional rift, Valeria murmured, her heterochromatic eyes reflecting the unnatural light. It's too unstable, too hungry. It's consuming ambient mana, Issei observed, new senses detecting the energy flow. Growing stronger with each moment. They advanced across the courtyard, alert for threats. The academy stood eerily silent. No alarms, no emergency responses, as if the human world remained oblivious to the supernatural catastrophe unfolding. Where is everyone? Valeria asked, scanning the grounds. Inside, Issei pointed toward the old school building. I detect 5 devil signatures, the Occult Research Club. They're containing something. A notification appeared before his eyes. Quest alert. Academy under siege. Objective: investigate dimensional anomaly and assist containment. Reward: skill book, enhanced shadow perception. Accept. YN. Issei mentally confirmed, already moving toward the old building with Valeria close behind. As they approached, the ground beneath their feet trembled. Windows throughout the academy shattered simultaneously, glass exploding outward in a crystalline wave. Something's breaking through, Valeria warned, summoning crackling energy to her fingertips. Elite distorting magic unique to Lucifer bloodline. The old building's doors burst open. Kiba staggered out, supporting a badly injured Kaneko. Blood stained his normally immaculate uniform, and magical exhaustion clouded his eyes. Issei. Relief flooded his face before wariness replaced it. His gaze shifted to Valeria. And an ally, Issei replied curtly. What happened? The rift appeared without warning, Kiba explained, lowering Kaneko gently to the ground. Creatures started emerging, like living shadows but wrong somehow. Rias and Akino are maintaining a containment barrier while Asia tries to seal the rift. But they're failing. Valeria knelt beside Kaneko, examining her wounds with practiced efficiency. These injuries, they're infused with void energy. Similar to what I encountered at the thinning point. Quote, can you heal her? Kiba asked. Not directly, Valeria replied. But I can stabilize her. The rest depends on her own resilience. While they spoke, Issei approached the building, shadows gathering around him instinctively. Through the broken windows, he glimpsed flashes of crimson light, Rias's destruction magic, and golden barriers, Asia's defensive sacred gear. They won't last much longer, he stated, not as criticism but as tactical assessment. A notification appeared. Shadow domain available. Caution. Extended use may attract higher-level entities. Issei turned to Valeria. I'm going to establish a domain around the building. It will strengthen my abilities and give us control of the battlefield. She nodded, understanding immediately. All support from outside. My reality distortion can reinforce the domain's boundaries. Without further discussion, Issei entered the building, shadows flowing ahead of him like living scouts. The interior had transformed from familiar school club room to chaotic battlefield. Furniture lay shattered, walls bore claw marks from non-physical weapons, and at the center of the main room hovered a smaller version of the external rift, a pulsing wound in reality from which creatures were emerging. Rias stood before it, hair whipping in eldritch wind as she channeled destruction magic into a rapidly failing containment field. Akino floated above, lightning crackling between her fingers as she targeted emerging entities. Asia knelt at the circle's edge, hands raised in desperate prayer as her twilight healing attempted to mend reality itself. None noticed Issei's arrival until shadows exploded outward from his position, engulfing the entire room in seconds. Arise, domain of the Shadow Monarch. His voice resonated with harmonics that hadn't been present moments before, power flowing through him as the system responded to his command. The shadows solidified, transforming the club RO. into a space that existed simultaneously within and beyond normal reality. The walls receded into darkness, the ceiling vanished into star-studded void, and the floor became smooth obsidian that absorbed ambient light. The three devil women turned in shock as their environment transformed. The rift, however, remained, though its pulsing slowed, as if the domain's creation had imposed new rules upon it. Issei. Rias's voice reflected exhaustion and disbelief. He approached the containment circle without acknowledging her directly, analyzing the rift with his enhanced perception. Within his domain, his senses expanded exponentially, revealing the rift's true nature, not a natural phenomenon but something deliberately created, a summoning portal disguised as random dimensional breach. "Release the containment," he commanded. "You're feeding it." "What?" Rias stared at him in confusion. "If we release it, those things will." "The barrier isn't containing them," Issei interrupted. Quote, "It's providing the energy they need to fully materialize. They're using your power against you." Akino descended beside Rias, her shrine maiden robes tattered and singed. "He's right. I sensed something strange about their manifestation pattern." Rias hesitated, then nodded sharply. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. The crimson barrier collapsed. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the rift pulsed violently, and shadowy entities poured forth, humanoid figures with elongated limbs and faces consisting only of gaping maws filled with crystalline teeth. They moved with disjointed grace, leaving trails of void stuff behind them like afterimages. "Void wraiths," Valeria announced from the doorway, having followed Issei inside. "Abaddon's scouts." "How many?" Issei asked, already gathering shadows around his arms. "I count 17, Akino reported, lightning dancing between her fingertips. Issei's eyes narrowed, luminescent blue-white in the darkness of his domain. "No, 23. 6 are still materializing." He stepped forward, placing himself between the rift and the others. Within his shadow domain, power flowed more freely, responding to his will without the limitations imposed by normal reality. He extended his hands, and darkness coalesced into twin blades of concentrated shadow. "Arise," he commanded, and from his own shadow emerged his 3 elite soldiers, Abaddon's emissary. The crystalline devil, and the exorcist, alongside a dozen lesser shadows. Rias and her peerage stared in shock at the shadow army materializing within the room. Asia gasped, instinctively retreating behind Akino. "What are those?" Rias whispered. "My soldiers," Issei replied simply. Then, to his shadows, "Engage." The battle erupted with supernatural violence. Shadow Soldi, RS collided with void wraiths in a clash of opposing darknesses, one controlled and purposeful, the other chaotic and consuming. The crystalline devil shadow led the charge, its hardened form resistant to the wraith's corrosive touch. The exorcist shadow wielded replicas of its former light weapons, surprisingly effective against the void entities. Issei moved through the chaos with preternatural grace. Shadow blades slicing through wraiths that dissolved into particles of void stuff rather than blood or flesh. Each dispatched enemy attempted to reform until Issei developed the proper technique. A specific angle of cut followed by immediate shadow infusion that prevented reconstitution. Valeria joined the fray with different but complementary tactics. Her reality distortion magic created localized gravity wells that compressed wraiths into vulnerable concentrations, which Issei's shadows then systematically eliminated. Rias and Akino recovered from their surprise quickly, adding destruction magic and holy lightning to the assault. Asia remained back, healing injuries as they occurred with her sacred gear. The battle flowed across the expanded space of the shadow domain, wraiths darting and teleporting while shadow soldiers adapted to their movements with tactical precision guided by Issei's will. Cooperation emerged naturally between the former enemies, Akino's lightning her wraiths toward Valerius' gravity wells, Rias's destruction blasts creating openings for Issei's shadows to exploit. As the last visible wraith fell, Issei turned his attention to the rift itself. It had shrunk during the battle but remained open, pulsing with malevolent purpose. "It needs to be closed permanently," he stated, approaching the tear in reality. "Conventional sealing won't work," Valeria warned, joining him. Blood trickled from a small cut on her cheek, but she otherwise appeared unharmed. "It's anchored from the other side." "Then we sever the anchor," Issei replied. He raised his hand toward the rift. shadows extending from his fingertips like probing tentacles. They entered the rift, pushing against the natural resistance of dimensional boundaries. A notification appeared. Caution. Dimensional probe detected. Unknown entity attempting connection. Accept connection. YN. Issei hesitated, then selected N. The shadows withdrew from the rift immediately. Something's watching from the other side. He informed the others. Something intelligent, waiting for direct contact. Valerius' expression darkened. A trap. They wanted you to establish connection. Not just connection, Issei realized. Recognition. The probe was searching for specific energy signatures, trying to confirm my identity as the Shadow Monarch. The rift pulsed again, more violently. The remaining half-formed wraiths suddenly dissolved, their essence flowing back into the tear like water down a drain. The rift's edges began to stabilize, its chaotic energy organizing into deliberate patterns. It's transforming, Akino observed, lightning crackling defensively around her. Not transforming, Issei corrected, shadows gathering around him protectively. Evolving, adapting based on battlefield data. The rift contracted suddenly to a perfect circle 2 meters in diameter. Its surface smoothed into a mirror-like plane of absolute darkness that reflected nothing, absorbed everything. From its center emerged a single figure, humanoid but clearly not human, its form composed of crystallized void, facets catching light that should not exist within absolute darkness. Shadow Monarch, the figure spoke, its voice like glass breaking in slow motion. The Void Walker sends greetings. Issei stepped forward, positioning himself between the entity and the others. Deliver your message and depart. The crystalline figure tilted its head at an impossible angle, facets realigning into a new configuration that approximated amusement. So direct, so young. It gestured around the shadow domain. Impressive control for one so recently awakened, but ultimately irrelevant. My master existed before shadows had meaning. Your master failed to acquire me, Issei replied coldly. And now requires messengers rather than direct confrontation. Speaks volumes about which of us should be concerned. The figure's crystalline surface rippled. Bold words from one who doesn't yet comprehend the game being played. It extended a hand, and within its palm materialized a small object, a chess piece carved from void stuff. A king, Issei noted. A gift, the messenger announced. And a warning. The board is set. Pieces move whether you understand their purpose or not. Before anyone could respond, the figure flicked the chess piece toward Issei. Shadows instinctively rose to intercept it, but the piece passed through them as if they weren't there, stopping to hover before Issei's face. What you have become, the messenger continued, is a shadow of a shadow, an echo of true power. My master offers guidance, context, purpose. Reject these gifts at your peril. The chess piece began to rotate slowly, emitting waves of information that Issei's enhanced senses perceived as fragmented images. Vast armies clashing beneath alien skies, cities built from shadow and bone, a throne composed of compressed darkness upon which sat a figure both familiar and utterly foreign, another Shadow Monarch. Different yet similar to what Issei was becoming. Enough, Valeria interrupted, stepping forward with reality-distorting energy crackling around her hands. Your invitation is noted and rejected. Depart or be banished. The messenger turned its faceted non-face toward her. The last Lucifer speaks. How fitting that fallen stars align with borrowed shadows. It returned its attention to Issei. The offer remains open. When understanding dawns, when you recognize the limitations of your current path, the door will appear. With those cryptic words, the entity began to dissolve, its crystalline form breaking into countless fragments that flowed back into the rift like mercury returning to its source. The chess piece remained, still rotating before Issei. As the last fragments disappeared, the rift contracted rapidly, collapsing into itself until only a pinpoint of darkness remained. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, it vanished completely. The rotating chess piece clattered to the floor, suddenly solid and ordinary, though composed of material that absorbed all light that touched it. Silence filled the shadow domain. Issei's shadow soldiers remained vigilant, positioned defensively around the room's perimeter. Rias and her peerage stared at the fallen chess piece with expressions ranging from confusion to dread. What just happened? Rias finally asked. Contact. Valeria replied grimly. Abaddon has acknowledged Issei directly. The conflict has escalated from proxy engagement to personal attention. Is that good or bad? Akino asked, extinguishing her lightning. Both, Issei answered, kneeling to examine the chess piece without touching it. Direct attention means increased danger, but also suggests concern. Entities like Abad, Dawn don't waste personal resources on inconsequential threats. You've rattled him, Valeria concluded with grim satisfaction. Issei nodded slightly, then gestured. His shadow domain began to contract. The expanded space returning gradually to normal dimensions as the club room reasserted its physical parameters. His shadow soldiers dissolved back into his personal shadow, though he maintained heightened awareness of the surroundings. We should check on Kiba and Kaneko, Asia suggested, moving toward the door. They're stable, Issei informed her, his senses extending throughout the building and grounds. Kaneko's injuries are neutralized, though full recovery will take time. Rias approached cautiously, stopping at a respectful distance. Thank you for coming. Without your intervention, you would have fallen, Issei finished matter-of-factly. And Abaddon would have gained 5 devil pawns infused with void energy. Which was likely the primary objective, Valeria added, examining the walls where void wraiths had left fading marks. The messenger was opportunistic, not planned. Issei turned to her. We need to return to our original plan. The thinning point in the mountains has taken priority. Agreed. Valeria nodded. This attack confirms they're accelerating their timeline. Wait, Rias interjected. What thinning point? What timeline? Issei and Valeria exchanged glances, silently negotiating how much to share. Finally, Issei spoke. Abaddon is creating entry points throughout Japan, weakening dimensional barriers to facilitate larger incursions. Tonight was a test, possibly triggered by detecting our alliance. He gestured to the chess piece still on the floor. That's both message and monitoring device. It's transmitting information back to its source. Akino's eyes widened. Should we destroy it? No, Valeria replied. Destroying it would alert Abaddon to our awareness. Better to contain it and feed false information. I'll handle that, Rias offered, summoning a small crimson magic circle. The chess piece floated upward, enclosed within a translucent barrier before disappearing into a pocket dimension. Stored safely for now, Issei nodded acknowledgement, then turned to leave. Maintain heightened security. This attack won't be the last. Issei, Rias called after him. When he paused without turning, she continued, be careful. Whatever's happening, it's bigger than our previous conflicts. I'm aware, he replied neutrally, then glanced at Valeria. We should go. As they exited the building, leaving the occult research club to tend their wounds and strengthen defenses, Valeria studied Issei with analytical intensity. You handled that well, she observed as they crossed the moonlit courtyard. Both the combat and the aftermath. Necessity dictates adaptation, Issei replied. Then, after a moment's hesitation, you coordinated effectively with the devils despite no prior experience together. Valeria's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Battlefield pragmatism. Though I admit, the Grimoire heiress has trained her peerage better than most. They reached the school gates, pausing to survey the surrounding area for threats before proceeding. The night had deepened, clouds obscuring the moon and stars as if nature itself recognized the darkness gathering around Kuo town. The mountain shrine is 2 hours away at conventional travel speed, Valeria noted. Less if we utilize your shadow movement. Shadow movement has range limitations based on ambient darkness, Issei explained. And fleet's energy proportionate to distance and passengers. A notification appeared. New skill unlocked. Extended shadow movement. Requirements. Level 8 or sufficient catalyst. Issei considered the notification thoughtfully. However, there may be alternatives. The mountain shrine stood in a clearing surrounded by ancient cedar trees, their massive trunks reaching skyward like petrified guardians. Once a place of worship dedicated to the mountain kami, it had fallen into disrepair decades ago when rural depopulation left it without attendants. Stone lanterns lined the path leading to the main structure. Their lights long extinguished. Torii gates, once vermilion but now weathered to dull orange, marked the approach at regular intervals. Issei and Valeria materialized from shadow at the tree line. Having utilized a hybrid travel method, conventional transportation to the mountain's base, followed by shadow movement for the final approach. The journey had taken 90 minutes, leaving them 30 minutes before midnight, the optimal window according to Valeria's intelligence. No obvious sentries, Valeria observed, her heterochromatic eyes scanning the shrine grounds. But that doesn't mean unguarded. Issei extended his shadow perception, a sensory capability that detected variations in darkness rather than light. The shrine radiated wrongness, darkness that moved against natural patterns, collecting and concentrating rather than diffusing with distance from its source. The thinning point is beneath the main shrine building, he determined. The darkness is densest there, feeding upward like roots in reverse. They advanced cautiously across the clearing, alert for traps or guardians. The night itself seemed to hold its breath, insects and nocturnal animals conspicuously absent from the surrounding forest. Even the wind had stilled, leaving the shrine in unnatural silence. As they approached the first Torii gate, Issei paused. Barrier, he warned, indicating the seemingly empty space between the gate's pillars. Sophisticated. Detection rather than prevention. Valeria nodded, summoning delicate threads of reality-distorting energy to her fingertips. I can create a localized loop in the barrier's awareness, make it perceive only what was there moments before we pass through. She worked with practiced precision, manipulating energy patterns visible only to supernatural perception. After several tense moments, she nodded. Done. We have approximately 40 seconds per gate. They proceeded through the first gate, then the second and third, repeating the process at each. The main shrine building loomed ahead, a traditional structure raised on stilts, its wooden walls darkened with age, roof sagging slightly at the corners. Paper talismans hung from the eaves, moving subtly despite the absence of wind. Those aren't standard protection wards, Valeria noted, indicating the talismans. They're inverted, drawing energy inward rather than repelling it outward. Feeding the thinning, Issei agreed, studying the pattern. Systematic consumption of the shrine's lingering spiritual energy, redirected to weaken dimensional boundaries. They reached the shrine's entrance, steps leading up to sliding doors decorated with faded paintings of mountain landscapes. Before they could ascend, Issei's enhanced senses detected movement within. Not physical motion but energy shifting, becoming aware. We've been noticed, he stated quietly. Impossible, Valeria frowned. The barrier loops should have. The shrine doors slid open with a sound like dry bones breaking. From within the darkened interior stepped a figure that momentarily defied categorization. Neither human nor devil nor yokai, but something assembled from aspects of all three. Its body appeared feminine in basic structure but wrong in proportions, limbs too long and jointed in additional places. Its face resembled a no-mask, white porcelain with minimal features, that occasionally rippled to reveal glimpses of void beneath. Visitors, the entity spoke, its voice unexpectedly melodic despite its disturbing appearance. How delightful. The shrine has been without proper supplicants for so long. It descended the steps with fluid grace that contradicted its unnatural anatomy. As it reached the ground, it performed a perfect formal bow. I am Tsukuyomi no Makoto, it announced. Guardian of this sacred space. Valeria tensed beside Issei, recognition flashing across her features. Tsukuyomi is a major kami of the Japanese pantheon, she whispered. This creature is claiming divine identity. False claim, Issei replied quietly, shadows gathering subtly around his feet. Constructed identity based on location affinity. Void entity adapting to local spiritual parameters. The creature's mask tilted, eye holes fixing on Issei with disturbing intensity. The shadow speaks wisdom beyond its years. Not divine, no, but neither entirely false. It gestured around the shrine. This place remembered its kami long after humans forgot. Memory has power. Memory shapes what walks between worlds. It extended an unnaturally long-fingered hand toward them. You seek the thinning. The place where worlds kiss through parted veils. I can guide you, for appropriate offering. What offering would satisfy a memory pretending to be a god? Valeria asked, caution evident in her tone. The mask rippled, suggesting amusement. Recognition. Acknowledgement. The coin of divinity is belief, even momentary. Issei studied the entity carefully, assessing threat levels and sincerity. His shadow perception detected no immediate hostility, though abundant danger potential. The entity existed in a state of quantum indeterminacy, simultaneously guardian and threat, guide and obstacle. Depending on how they engaged with it, a notification appeared. Special quest available. The Shrine's Guardian. Objective. Navigate the entity's request without combat. Reward. Specialized shadow skill. Accept. YN. Issei accepted, then stepped forward. We acknowledge Tsukuyomi's connection to this place and seek permission to investigate what corrupts it. The entity's posture changed subtly, straightening, solidifying, becoming marginally more natural in its proportions. Accepted, it replied, voice deepening toward masculine registers. The corruption festers beneath the heart altar. It came 17 days ago, wearing a pilgrim's face but carrying void in its heart. Abaddon's emissary, Valeria surmised. Names have power, the entity cautioned. Speak carefully beneath sacred eaves. Devil daughter. It turned and reascended the stairs, each movement more normal than the last, as if their acknowledgement was literally reshaping its existence. At the shrine entrance, it gestured for them to follow. As this wise, Valeria whispered as they climbed the stairs. Necessary, Issei replied. The entity is tied to this location. Neither fully Abaddon's nor fully independent. It exists in the boundary state created by the thinning itself. Inside, the shrine was larger than its exterior suggested, space distorted by supernatural influence. Wooden floors, polished by centuries of reverent feet, gleamed in the dim light filtering through paper windows. The air hung heavy with incense and the musty scent of abandoned sanctity. At the far end stood a simple altar, behind which hung a mirror blackened with age. The entity glided across the floor, stopping before the altar. Beneath, it stated, gesturing downward. The pilgrim brought offerings of crystallized darkness. Buried them beneath sacred wood. Now they grow, like seeds drinking starlight in reverse. Issei approached the altar, kneeling to examine the floor beneath it. His shadow perception confirmed concentrated darkness gathering below, a nexus of void energy pulsing with unnatural rhythm. How do we access it? He asked. The entity's mask tilted toward the mirror behind the altar. Reflection shows truth turned backward. Step through reversed light to find what hides from direct sight. Valeria joined Issei at the altar, studying the blackened mirror with newfound understanding. It's not tarnished, she realized. It's a portal. Conventional mirror reversed, Issei agreed. Reflecting darkness instead of light. The entity drifted backward, creating space for them to work. The pilgrim returns nightly to nurture his seeds. The hour approaches. Valeria checked a delicate timepiece on her wrist. 20 minutes until midnight. Issei stood, facing the mirror directly. Within its blackened surface, he detected subtle movement, not reflection but autonomous motion, shadows shifting independently behind the glass. He extended his awareness toward it, establishing connection through shared affinity with darkness. The mirror responded, surface rippling like disturbed water. Images formed within its depths, fragmented, chaotic, but gradually coalescing into coherence. Issei saw the shrine as it had been decades ago, attended by priests and visitors, vibrant with spiritual energy. Then change, abandonment, decay, and finally transformation as Abaddon's emissary arrived, corrupting the lingering spiritual resonance. Most importantly, he saw the mechanism of the thinning, crystalline spikes driven into the earth beneath the shrine, each pulsing with void energy that systematically eroded the dimensional boundary. The pattern matched what Valeria had shown him earlier, one point in a larger array spanning Japan. I see it, he informed Valeria. 7 crystalline anchors arranged in a heptagram. They're feeding on the boundary's resistance, growing stronger as it weakens. Can we remove them? Not directly. Their phase shift, existing simultaneously here and in Abaddon's dimension. But, Issei studied the pattern more closely. There's a focal point, a controller crystal at the center. The entity, which had remained silent during Issei's examination, suddenly stiffened. He comes, it warned, voice shifting back toward feminine registers. The pilgrim returns to tend his garden of darkness. Issei turned from the mirror. How long? Moments only. The entity gestured toward the shrine entrance. He brings hunters this night. He has felt interference. Valeria summoned her reality distortion magic, energy crackling around her hands. We need a strategy. If we're detected here, the other thinning points will be reinforced. Issei nodded, mind racing through tactical options. The confrontation at Kuo H Academy had revealed their opposition to Abaddon. Stealth was compromised. However, they still possessed the element of surprise regarding their specific location tonight. A notification appeared. Tactical option available. Shadow ambush. Requirements. Shadow domain plus extraction preparation. Chance of success. 78%. I'll establish a domain, Issei decided. Limited radius, centered on the altar. When they enter, we neutralize them immediately. You handle any support units, I'll focus on the emissary. Valeria nodded sharply. Understood. Issei turned to the entity. Return to your post. Give no indication of our presence. Quote. The creature performed another perfect bow, mask smooth and expressionless. As you wish, Shadow Sovereign. It glided toward the entrance, form elongating subtly as it moved, returning to its initial uncanny proportions. Once alone, Issei placed his hand against the altar. Domain establishment requires focus. Cover me for 30 seconds. Understood, Valeria confirmed, positioning herself protectively. Issei closed his eyes, concentrating on the darkness gathering within and around him. Unlike at Kuo Academy, where he'd established a domain at full power, this required precision, a controlled expansion limited to the shrine's interior, with carefully regulated energy output to avoid detection before the trap was sprung. Arise, he whispered, voice barely audible. Shadow domain. Darkness flowed from him in controlled waves, adhering to the shrine's walls, ceiling, and floor like living paint. It transformed the space subtly rather than dramatically, deepening shadows, muting sounds, creating perfect conditions for ambush while maintaining the appearance of normalcy to outside perception. A notification confirmed success. Shadow W domain established. Stealth configuration. Duration. 1 hour. Special effect. Enhanced extraction potential. Issei opened his eyes, which glowed more intensely within the domain's boundaries. Done. Valeria nodded approval. Impressive control. Most supernatural beings require years to develop such precision. Before Issei could respond, they heard voices approaching, multiple individuals ascending the shrine steps. The entity's greeting drifted through paper walls, its tone perfectly normal, giving no indication of anything amiss. Honored by your continued patronage, Pilgrim Sama. The shrine benefits from your devotion. The honor is mine, replied a male voice, smooth and cultured. Sacred spaces deserve preservation, especially in our modern age of forgetting. Footsteps crossed the wooden porch, multiple sets. Issei noted, counting at least 4 distinct patterns. The entity led them toward the main doors, sliding panels open with ceremonial precision. Please enter and pay respects, it invited. I shall prepare purification water. Issei and Valeria had positioned themselves on either side of the main door, concealed by deepened shadows. As the visitors entered, Issei catalogued them instantly. The leader, a middle-aged Japanese man in traditional hakama and haori, flanked by 3 bodyguards in modern business attire that poorly concealed their supernatural nature. Void constructs. Valeria mouthed silently, recognizing the guards' true forms beneath human disguise. The leader, obviously another of Abaddon's emissaries, approached the altar with practiced reverence. His human masquerade flawless except to Issei's shadow perception, which detected the void essence pulsing beneath the surface. Begin, Issei commanded mentally, activating the domain's full capabilities. Shadows exploded from concealment, engulfing the room in absolute darkness before reconfiguring into combat formation. The 3 guards were immobilized instantly, shadow tendrils wrapping around limbs and throats before they could react. The emissary alone maintained composure, sighing with theatrical disappointment. Ambush, he noted calmly. How predictable. His human disguise melted away, revealing the same crystalline void composition as the messenger at Kuo Academy, though this entity appeared more substantial, more fully materialized in this dimension. Shadow Monarch, the emissary acknowledged, ignoring his restrained guards. We meet at last. Your intervention at Kuo Academy was noted with interest. Your thinning operation ends tonight, Issei stated, stepping forward with shadows gathering around his fists. The emissary laughed, a sound like distant glass shattering. 1 point among 7, hardly consequential, he gestured dismissively. Remove this point, and another will establish elsewhere. The array adjusts, adapts, continues. Inevitability cannot be ambushed, young shadow. Valeria maintained her position, reality distorting energy ready but held in reserve. Why the theatrical approach? Why not simply establish all points simultaneously? The Devil Princess asks relevant questions, the emissary noted with apparent approval. Because, child of Lucifer, dimensional physics requires acclimatization. Each point must stabilize before the next can establish without catastrophic resonance. While the emissary spoke, Issei's Daos had been working beneath conscious detection, extending downward through the floor toward the crystalline anchors he'd observed in the mirror. Within his domain, his control over darkness approached absolute, allowing simultaneous action on multiple fronts. You're stalling, Issei observed, focusing the emissary's attention on himself. Buying time for what? Reinforcements. Further stabilization. The emissary's crystalline features shifted into what might have been a smile. Perception. Good. My master appreciates intellect alongside power. He took a step forward, void energy crackling around him. I stall for your benefit. Shadow Monarch. This encounter need not end in conflict. My master's offer remains open. Guidance, context, purpose. The chess piece, Issei recalled. Your master offers servitude disguised as partnership. Servitude. The emissary sounded genuinely amused. No. Evolution. Transcendence beyond the limitations of your borrowed power. While they spoke, Issei's shadows located the central controller crystal beneath the shrine. Rather than attempting to destroy it directly, they began restructuring its connection pattern, subtly altering the flow of void energy through the array. The Shadow Monarch's power isn't borrowed, Valeria interjected. It's inherited. Legitimate succession rather than theft. Charming mythology, the emissary replied. But fundamentally misinformed. What you've become, he addressed Issei directly, is the equivalent of a photocopy, a reproduction containing surface details but lacking depth, context, originality. Issei remained outwardly impassive despite the emissary's provocations. The shadows beneath the shrine had completed their work. The controller crystal now redirected energy in a closed loop rather than outward to the dimensional boundary. The thinning had been halted without destroying the evidence of its existence. A notification confirmed success. Objective completed. Thinning point neutralized. Special reward. Void resistance plus 10%. Shadow extraction opportunity available. Original or copy? Issei replied finally, the result remains the same. Your operation here has failed. The emissary's crystalline features shifted, registering the change beneath the shrine. Clever, he acknowledged. Very clever indeed. Redirection rather than destruction. Subtle. My master will be pleased by your ingenuity. If not your allegiance. Your guards are constructed from corrupted shadow essence, Issei observed, changing topics abruptly. Twisted versions of what I command. Prototypes, the emissary confirmed. Primitive compared to what follows. They contain extractable shadows, Issei continued, shadows darkening around him. Corrupted, yes, but convertible. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the emissary's features. That would be unadvisable. Corrupted essence is unpredictable, potentially contagious. For ordinary extractors, perhaps, Issei agreed. Then, without warning, arise. Army of Shadows. His 3 elite shadow soldiers materialized instantly, the previous emissary, the crystalline devil, and the exorcist, alongside his lesser shadows. They surrounded the void constructs. Weapons raised. Extract, Issei commanded. Before the emissary could intervene, Issei's shadows plunged spectral weapons into the 3 guards. Instead of physical damage, the weapons functioned as conduits, drawing darkness from the constructs into Issei's waiting shadow. The guards convulsed, their void crystal forms destabilizing as essential components were forcibly removed. Impossible, the emissary hissed, void energy crackling around him as he prepared to attack. The corruption should prevent. Reality shatter. Valeria's voice rang out as she unleashed her held power. The space around the emissary fractured like broken glass, each fragment reflecting slightly different versions of reality. The distortion immobilized him temporarily, interrupting his attack preparation. The extraction completed in seconds. Where 3 void constructs had stood, only empty husks remained, collapsing into piles of inert crystal that rapidly deteriorated into dust. Issei felt the extracted essence integrating with his shadow, undergoing purification and restructuring guided by the system. A notification appeared. Shadow extraction complete. New shadow soldiers acquired. Void Scout uncommon. Void Enforcer rare. Void Sentinel, rare. Warning. Void essence detected. Purification in progress. The emissary recovered from Valerius reality distortion. Void energy swirling around him with increased intensity. You've overstepped, Shadow Monarch. Extraction of void-tainted shadows requires evolutionary adaptations you haven't yet developed. Your concern is noted. Issei replied coolly, shadows ready for combat. But rather than attack, the emissary suddenly laughed, genuine amusement rather than theatrical display. Oh, this exceeds expectations. My master suspected potential, but this accelerates timelines considerably. He stepped backward, void energy condensing around him. Consider tonight a mutual assessment, Shadow Monarch. You've impressed sufficiently to warrant direct attention rather than proxy engagement. A swirling portal began to form behind him. We'll meet again soon, perhaps next time without Vil princesses and false gods as intermediaries. Before either Issei or Valeria could respond, the emissary stepped backward into the portal, which collapsed immediately after his passage. Silence descended on the shrine, broken only when the entity, Tsukuyomi's memory given form, glided back into the main hall. The pilgrim departs, Shadow Sovereign, it noted unnecessarily. But the seeds remain beneath, changed but not removed. Neutralized temporarily, Issei confirmed. The thinning has stopped, but the physical components remain as evidence. Valeria approached the altar, examining the blackened mirror thoughtfully. We should document everything before leaving. The configuration, the crystal arrangement, it might reveal patterns applicable to other thinning points. Issei nodded agreement, then addressed the entity. What happens to you now? With the thinning halted, your existence should stabilize. The mask tilted curiously. Existence continues as memory permits. This place remembers its purpose. If not its Kami's true nature. I shall remain until memory fades or purpose returns in fullness. A guardian without worship, Valeria mused. Existing in the boundary between genuine divinity and constructed identity. The entity performed another perfect bow. As many gods do in this age of forgetting, devil daughter. Issei dismissed his shadow domain gradually, allowing natural light and spatial dimensions to return. As the supernatural darkness receded, he felt the strain of extended power usage, not physical exhaustion but energy depletion that would require time to replenish. A final notification appeared. Quest completed. The Shrine's Guardian. Reward unlocked. Shadow Binding. Specialized skill for temporary control of non-extracted entities. Level up. Current level 8. We've accomplished our immediate objective, Issei noted. But the emissary's escape means Abaddon now has confirmation of our interference. And your ability to extract void constructs, Valeria added. Concern evident in her tone. That clearly surprised him, which suggests it wasn't considered possible. Adaptability, Issei replied. The essence of growth. They spent the next hour documenting the thinning point, Valeria creating detailed magical recordings of the crystal arrangement while Issei mapped the energy flows using his shadow perception. The entity observed without interference, occasionally offering cryptic insights about the shrine's history and spiritual significance. As they prepared to depart near dawn, Issei addressed the entity one final time, if the pilgrim returns. I shall reveal nothing, it interrupted, mask smooth and unreadable. Memory serves its own purposes, not the void's hunger. Valeria bowed respectfully to the entity. May your shrine find attendance again someday. The mask rippled slightly, suggesting something like wistfulness. Perhaps, or perhaps new purpose emerges from altered circumstances. Adaptation, as the Shadow Sovereign notes, is existence's constant companion. They left the shrine as the first light of dawn illuminated the mountain. The cedar trees stood silent sentinel as they descended the path, passing through torii gates that seemed more substantial, more vibrantly colored than when they had arrived. The shrine is healing already, Valeria observed. With the thinning neutralized, natural spiritual energy is returning. Temporarily, Issei cautioned. Abaddon will attempt to re-establish the connection, though perhaps at a different location now that we've discovered this one. They reached the tree line, pausing to survey the shrine one last time. The entity stood on the porch, its uncanny form silhouetted against the rising sun, mask turned toward them in silent acknowledgement. We should return to Kuo town, Valeria suggested. Analyze what we've learned, prepare for the next thinning point. Issei nodded agreement, but his attention had shifted elsewhere. his enhanced senses detecting a new presence approaching from the forest to their right. Not void energy, not devil aura, but something distinctly Japanese in its magical signature. "We're not alone," he stated quietly. Valeria tensed, summoning energy to her fingertips. Abaddon's reinforcements. No. Different. Issei turned toward the presence, shadows gathering subtly around him. "Show yourself," he called. "Your concealment is effective against ordinary perception, but not against shadow sight." Silence answered for several moments. Then the air shimmered several meters away, revealing a young woman in traditional Miko attire. White haori, red hakama, her midnight blue hair gathered in a practical tail. She carried a ceremonial bow in one hand, an Ofuda talisman in the other, humming with spiritual energy that Issei's senses perceived as cool blue light. "Impressive detection," she stated, her voice carefully modulated to reveal neither surprise nor concern. Her eyes, shifting between deep blue and violet depending on the angle of morning light, studied them with analytical intensity. "Few can perceive through a Sakino concealment barrier." "Sakino," Valeria repeated, recognition flashing across her features. "The shrine family from Kyoto. I thought your line ended decades ago." "Reports of our extinction were politically expedient," the young woman replied. She approached with measured steps, stopping at a respectful distance. "I am Miyuki Sakino, current head of what remains of the Sakino Shrine Keepers." Her gaze shifted to Issei, studying his shadows with particular interest. "And you must be the Shadow Monarch I've been tracking for the past week. Your energy signature is distinctive." Issei regarded her with equal assessment. Her spiritual power was considerable, refined, focused, disciplined in ways that suggested extensive training despite her apparent youth. More importantly, she carried no trace of void corruption or Abaddon's influence. "Why track me?" he asked directly. Miyuki's expression remained composed, though something like grim humor flickered in her eyes. "Initially, to determine whether you represented threat or opportunity. Japan has experienced enough supernatural catastrophes without adding shadow armies to the list." She gestured toward the shrine behind them. "But your actions here suggest prioritization of dimensional stability over power accumulation." "Intriguing. You've been monitoring the thinning points," Valeria surmised. "All 7, Miyuki confirmed. "Though understanding their purpose you hired specialized knowledge my family's archives couldn't provide." Her gaze returned to Issei. "Until I detected your emergence and recognized the pattern from ancestral records. Shadow Monarch vs. Void Walker, a conflict predating Japan's written history. Your records mention this specifically?" Issei asked, genuine curiosity penetrating his usual reserve. Miyuki nodded once, crisp and precise. "The Sakino family has maintained records of supernatural phenomena for 27 generations. Our ancestral scrolls reference a conflict between he who commands darkness and the hunger between stars approximately 3,000 years ago. The account is fragmentary but mentions 7 points of thinning, just as we're seeing now." "What happened?" Valeria asked. "Unknown," Miyuki replied. Records were damaged during the Anin War. However," she hesitated, then continued with evident reluctance, "there are references to a great sacrifice. A price paid in shadow and blood to restore the veil between dimensions." The implication hung in the morning air, creating momentary silence among the 3 supernatural beings. Finally, Issei spoke. "Your family archives. Do they contain information about the Shadow Monarch's abilities? The system that guides development?" Miyuki's eyes narrowed slightly. "Potentially. The references are oblique, written in archaic Japanese mixed with symbols we haven't fully translated." She studied him with renewed intensity. "You seek understanding of your own nature." "Among other things," Issei acknowledged. A notification appeared. "New quest available. The Sakino Archives. Objective: gain access to ancient knowledge regarding the Shadow Monarch. Reward: specialized shadow skill plus historical context. Accept." Issei accepted without hesitation. "Would you be willing to share this knowledge in exchange for assistance with the remaining thinning points?" Miyuki considered the offer, her expression revealing nothing of her internal deliberation. "A conditional exchange may be arranged," she finally stated. "I require demonstration of your intentions beyond this single intervention." Pattern of behavior rather than isolated action. Reasonable, Issei replied. I propose joint investigation of the next thinning point. You observe directly rather than from concealment. Additionally, Valeria added, we can share our findings from tonight's encounter, the crystalline configuration, the energy flow patterns, the extraction mechanism. Miyuki nodded, decision apparently reached. Acceptable terms. The next thinning G-point activation is predicted in 3 days, near Sendai. My analysis suggests a temple complex abandoned during the 2011 tsunami. How are you predicting activations? Valeria asked with professional curiosity. Astronomical calculations combined with ley line fluctuations, Miyuki explained. The thinning points follow celestial alignments modified by local spiritual geography. Each ion requires specific configurations that can be mathematically predicted once the pattern is identified. Issei exchanged glances with Valeria, silent communication passing between them. Miyuki shook. Ino represented an unexpected but potentially valuable ally, someone with specialized knowledge directly relevant to their confrontation with Abaddon, untainted by void influence or political entanglement. We'll meet you in Sendai, Issei confirmed. 2 days from now, to allow preparation time. Coordinate through conventional methods, Miyuki suggested, producing a business card from within her sleeve. Like everything about her, the card was traditional in appearance but functionally modern, containing basic contact information alongside a small seal that Issei's enhanced perception identified as a minor tracking charm. He accepted the card with a slight nod, shadows briefly enveloping it before storing it within his pocket. Until Sendai, Miyuki returned the nod with precise formality, then activated another concealment barrier, not true invisibility but perceptual deflection that would render her effectively unnoticeable to conventional observation. Within moments, she had disappeared into the forest, leaving Issei and Valeria alone in the dawn light. A Sakino shrine maiden, Valeria mused, genuine surprise coloring her tone. Their bloodline was rumored to have mystic contracts with various kami, allowing specialized barrier techniques and divine communication. If she's legitimate, she is, Issei confirmed. Her spiritual energy bears markers of authentic lineage. No deception detected. Then we've gained a potentially valuable ally, Valeria concluded. One with knowledge predating modern supernatural records. Issei nodded agreement, though his thoughts had already shifted to practical considerations. We should return to Kuo town. I need to integrate the void shadows properly, and you mentioned archives you wanted to consult regarding the chess piece. Indeed. Valeria gestured toward the path leading down the mountain. Shall we use conventional transportation? Your energy reserves must be depleted after tonight's activities. Rather than answering verbally, Issei gathered shadows around them both. Integration during travel serves dual purposes. Efficiency. Before Valeria could protest, darkness enveloped them completely, transporting them from the mountain shrine toward Kuo town as the sun continued its ascent into morning sky. The apartment above Matsuda's family restaurant provided Issei with practical anonymity, a location known to few. Secured with both conventional locks and shadow barriers that alerted him to any approach. The space itself was spartanly furnished. Futon, desk, chair, and storage cabinet containing essential supplies. No decorations adorned the walls, no personal touches revealed the occupant's personality. Issei sat cross-legged in the center of the room, eyes closed in deep concentration. Before him hovered 3 shadowy forms, the void constructs extracted from the shrine, still undergoing purification and integration. Unlike normal shadow extraction, which completed relatively quickly, void essence required extended processing to remove corruption without losing unique properties. A notification appeared. Void purification. 78% complete. Estimated completion time, 3 hours. Warning. Void resistance recommended before deployment. Dismissing the notification, Issei continued the mental work of restructuring the extracted shadows. Each represented a different type of void construct, with different capabilities and corruption patterns that required specialized approaches. The process demanded complete concentration, leaving him outwardly motionless while his consciousness navigated the complex landscape of shadow essence. 3 sharp knocks on the door interrupted his focus. Maintaining the purification process with part of his awareness, he extended shadow perception through the apartment. identifying the visitor before responding. "Enter, Valeria," he called without opening his eyes. The door opened to admit the silver-haired devil princess, who carried several ancient-looking scrolls and a modern tablet computer. She paused upon seeing his meditative state and the hovering shadow constructs. "Should I return later?" she asked, recognizing the delicacy of his current task. "Unnecessary," Issei replied, opening his eyes while maintaining concentration on the purification. "Progress is stable. Information sharing takes precedence." Valeria nodded, settling at the small table in the corner and arranging her materials methodically. "I've completed preliminary research regarding both the chess piece and the historical conflict between Shadow Monarch and Void Walker. The results are concerning." "Proceed," Issei encouraged, dividing his attention between her report and the shadow integration. "First, the chess piece. She produced a magical image of the void-crafted king that Rias had contained. It's not merely a monitoring device but a specialized beacon, designed to attune dimensional frequencies between our world and Abaddon's realm. The 7 thinning points create a geometric foundation, but the chess piece provides focused targeting for Abaddon personally rather than his constructs," Issei concluded. "Exactly." Valeria displayed a diagram on her tablet, a 3-dimensional representation of Japan with the thinning points highlighted and energy flows connecting them. Once all 7 points activate, they'll create a stable pathway. The chess piece serves as the destination marker, drawing Abaddon to its specific location. "Huo Academy," Issei noted. "Where the piece was delivered. Precisely where his first attempt to acquire you occurred." Valeria confirmed. "Symmetry appears important in void physics." Issei considered this information, correlating it with knowledge extracted from the emissary and insights gained at the shrine. "The ritual timeline accelerated, as we suspected." Valeria consulted one of the scrolls, carefully unrolling the ancient parchment. "According to historical precedent, the final thinning point activates during the dark moon, 7 days from now." One of the hovering shadow constructs pulsed suddenly, void essence briefly resisting purification before Issei reasserted control. The momentary disruption passed quickly, but Valeria had noticed, her heterochromatic eyes tracking the fluctuation with concern. "The void essences resist integration more strongly than standard extractions," she observed. "Expected resistance," Issei replied. "Void and shadow represent opposing principles, consumption versus preservation, chaos versus order. The system adapts accordingly." Valeria nodded, returning to her research materials. "Regarding historical precedent, I've found references to a previous Shadow Monarch in multiple supernatural archives, devil records, yokai scrolls, even fragmentary angel codices. All describe a being of immense power who commanded darkness itself, fought against a cosmic consumer called variously, the Devourer, Star Eater, or most commonly, Abaddon. Outcome?" Issei asked, continuing his purification work. "Victory, apparently, though at tremendous cost." Valeria's expression grew solemn. "The Shadow Monarch sacrificed Somethi. Essential. The records disagree on specifics, but all mention that he divided his essence to seal Abaddon away rather than destroying him outright. Consistent with Miyuki Sakino's fragmentary records," Issei noted. "The great sacrifice," she mentioned. "Indeed." Valeria hesitated, then continued with evident reluctance. "There's another consistent element in the historical accounts. The Shadow Monarch's power grew through conflict, each battle, each extraction increasing his capabilities. But the final confrontation required," she paused, selecting words carefully, "complete manifestation. Total embodiment of the Monarch's essence." Issei's eyes narrowed slightly, suggesting that what you currently are, Valeria stated directly, represents an incomplete manifestation. Artial awakening rather than full emergence. The implications settled between them like physical weight. Issei had suspected something similar based on the system's guidance, the leveling mechanism, the gradual unlocking of abilities. The notifications mentioning awakening phase, rather than complete manifestation. The original Shadow Monarch, Issei mused, divided his essence. Perhaps what awakened in me represents one fragment of that division. A logical conclusion, Valeria agreed. Which raises the question of where other fragments might reside, and whether reunification is possible, or advisable. Before Issei could respond, The void constructs pulsed simultaneously, their purification reaching critical threshold. He returned his full attention to the integration process, CTing shadow essence to complete the final transformations. The three hovering forms stabilized gradually, corruption burning away like mist under morning sun until only purified shadow remained. A notification confirmed success. Void purification complete. New shadow soldiers available for deployment. Void Scout. Enhanced sensory capabilities, dimensional perception. Void Enforcer. Combat. Specialist with phase-shifting abilities. Void Sentinel. Defensive specialist with barrier generation. Special ability unlocked. Limited void manipulation. Issei lowered the newly integrated shadows into his personal shadow, where they joined his growing army. The exertion had depleted his energy reserves significantly, but the acquisition of void-based capabilities represented substantial tactical advantage. Integration complete, he announced, shifting from his meditative posture to join Valeria at the table. The void capabilities will prove useful against Abaddon's constructs. And the corruption risk? She asked. Genuine concern evident. Managed, Issei replied. The system provides safeguards against contamination. Each integration becomes progressively easier as adaptation occurs. Valeria studied him thoughtfully, heterochromatic eyes seeming to perceive beyond physical appearance. You're evolving quickly, far more rapidly than historical accounts suggest possible. The original Shadow Monarch reportedly took decades to reach comparable capabilities. Different circumstances, Issei noted. Direct inheritance rather than gradual discovery. Additionally, he paused, considering how much to reveal before continuing. My previous existence as the Red Dragon Emperor may have created favorable conditions for accelerated development. Dragon essence, even extracted, leaves lasting changes in spiritual architecture. A fascinating hypothesis, Valeria agreed. The combination of draconic adaptability with shadow assimilation potential creates synergistic growth patterns. They continued discussing research findings and tactical considerations as afternoon light faded into evening. Plans for the Sendai expedition took shape, transportation arrangements, equipment requirements. Coordination protocols with Miyuki Sakino. Throughout the conversation, Issei noted subtle shifts in Valeria's demeanor, increasing comfort in his presence, reduced vigilance thresholds. More natural conversational rhythms, trust developing, however cautiously. As darkness fell completely, Valeria gathered her materials in preparation for departure. I'll continue researching void physics and historical precedents, she stated, organizing scrolls with practiced efficiency. There may be countermeasures documented in older archives that modern supernatural entities have forgotten. Issei nodded agreement. I'll focus on capability development and integration testing. The void shadows require practical deployment to fully understand their potential. Valeria hesitated at the door, something uncharacteristically uncertain in her expression. Issei, she began, using his given name directly for the first time. What the historical records suggest about complete manifestation, about the sacrifice required to truly oppose Abaddon, concerns you, he finished for her. Yes, she met his gaze directly, heterochromatic eyes serious in the apartment's dim lighting. Not merely from tactical perspective but from, she paused, searching for appropriate terminology, partnership perspective. Sacrificial victories hollow both sides of an alliance. The sentiment surprised him, not the tactical assessment, which aligned with rational strategy, but the personal concern underlying it. Since his rebirth as the Shadow Monarch, few had expressed concern for I am as an individual rather than as power or threat or tool. Noted, he replied, more gently than his usual tone. All paths remain under consideration. Optimal solutions prioritized. Valeria studied him a moment longer, then nodded once, crisp and professional once more. Until tomorrow, then. Rest well, Shadow Monarch. After she departed, Issei remained at the table, reviewing notification OGS and system updates from the day's activities. The apartment felt unusually empty, the silence more noticeable than normal. A curious development, he noted analytically. Adaptation occurring not me. Rely in combat capabilities but in interpersonal parameters as well. Growth taking unexpected forms. As midnight approached, he prepared for the night's training regime, shadow manipulation exercises. designed to integrate the new void-based capabilities with existing skills. Before beginning, however, he found himself considering Miyuki Sakino and her family archives. The Shrine Maiden represent a different kind of knowledge resource, spiritual rather than supernatural, human tradition rather than otherworldly power. Balance, perhaps, perspective from multiple domains. With that thought, he initiated Shadow Domain Manifestation, transforming the small apartment into expansive training grounds where he could properly test his evolving capabilities. Within this private dimension, no one would witness his experiments. His occasional failures, his gradual mastery of powers that rewrote the very rules of darkness itself. No one except the shadows that served him, and perhaps, somewhere beyond perception. The fragmented essence of the original Shadow Monarch, watching its inheritance take new form in unexpected hands. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, The Fox's Trail. Dawn painted Sendai's coastline in watercolor hues. Fishing boats already dotting the horizon as the city gradually stirred to life. From his vantage point atop an abandoned coastal watchtower, Issei surveyed the landscape. With enhanced perception, not merely seeing but sensing the subtle currents of supernatural energy flowing through the region. The devastating tsunami of 2011 had left more than physical scars, dimensional weak points lingered where mass death had occurred, creating natural fault lines that Abaddon's agents had clearly identified for exploitation. The temple complex lies 3 kilometers north, Miyuki Sakino stated. Joining him at the tower's edge, the Shrine Maiden moved with calculated precision, each gesture economical yet graceful. 2 days of joint preparation had established professional rapport but little personal connection, exactly as she seemed to prefer. Satellite imagery confirms increased activity over the past 72 hours. Issei nodded, mentally cataloging energy patterns. The thinning has already begun. Preliminary phase, not yet stabilized. We have approximately 4 hours before critical threshold, Miyuki confirmed, consulting a small device that reads. MB led an antique pocket watch but contained complex magical circuitry. At which point extraction becomes significantly more difficult. Valeria materialized from a teleportation circle behind them. Silver-white hair gathered in a practical braid, combat attire replacing her usual casual elegance. Perimeter reconnaissance complete, she reported. Human security presence minimal, 2 guards at the main gate, likely unaware of the complex's true purpose. Supernatural defenses, however, substantial, Issei finished, having detected the same through shadow perception. Layered barrier configurations with void-infused components. More sophisticated than the mountain shrine. They're adapting to our interference, Miyuki observed, midnight blue eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Learning from previous encounters, as are we, Issei replied, shadows gathering subtly around his feet in preparation. The past 2 days had been dedicated to intensive preparation, Issei training with his newly integrated void shadows. Valeria researching countermeasures against void constructs, Miyuki providing historical context from her family archives. Their temporary alliance functioned with unexpected efficiency, each contributing specialized knowledge toward common purpose. The approach strategy remains viable, Valeria noted, joining them at the tower's edge. Miyuki's barrier techniques show. Uld create sufficient distraction at the northern perimeter while we infiltrate from the eastern cliff face. The guards, Miyuki asked, checking her bow, a traditional weapon enhanced with modern materials and ancient enchantments. Non-combatants, Issei decided. Likely local security personnel hired for legitimate appearance. Shadow manipulation will redirect their attention without requiring neutralization. Miyuki nodded approval, her expression revealing momentary relief behind professional composure. Despite her involvement in supernatural conflict, she maintained certain ethical boundaries, particularly regarding innocent human bystanders. It was a characteristic Issei had noted with analytical interest, cataloging it alongside other aspects of his temporary allies' behavioral patterns. We move in 20 minutes, he stated, shadows extending around him in preparation. Final equipment checks now. While Miyuki and Valeria confirmed their respective preparations, Issei conducted internal assessment. Energy reserves at 87% capacity, Shadow Army fully integrated including the 3 void-based additions, system notifications clear of warnings or restrictions. His evolutio, As Shadow Monarch continued at accelerated pace, each encounter providing exponential rather than incremental growth. A notification appeared. Quest alert. Sendai thinning point. Primary objective. Neutralize dimensional thinning. Secondary objective. Gather intelligence on Abaddon's methodology. Bonus objective. Reward. Level up plus specialized shadow skill. Accepting the quest with a thought. Issei completed final mental preparations. Unlike the mountain shrine, this operation had been thoroughly planned. Approach vectors mapped, contingencies established, responsibilities clearly defined. Miyuki would manage external barriers and provide mystical countermeasures against void energies. Valeria would handle direct combat against supernatural entities, her reality distortion particularly effective against void constructs. Issei would focus on the thinning point itself, applying knowledge gained from previous experience to neutralize the dimensional breach. Efficiency through specialization. It's time, he announced as the city below reached peak morning activity, traffic flowing, pedestrians hurrying to work, normality providing perfect cover for supernatural operations. Shadow transport available for both of you. Miyuki shook her head, producing a small paper talisman from within her sleeve. Unnecessary. My family's movement technique serves adequately. I prefer teleportation circles for precision navigation, Valeria added. We'll rendezvous at the designated coordinates. Issei nodded acceptance, shadows already enveloping him. 15 minutes. His form dissolved into darkness, flowing down the watchtower and across the landscape like liquid night despite the morning sun. Shadow movement had become increasingly efficient as his control developed, no longer requiring ambient darkness, capable of traversing sunlit terrain with minimal energy expenditure. The sensation remained unique, consciousness dispersed yet unified, perception expanded beyond normal parameters. Existence simultaneously physical and ephemeral. He reached the temple complex's eastern approach in minutes, reforming behind a weathered stone lantern at the base of the cliff. The temple itself stood partially collapsed atop the promontory, traditional architecture damaged first by tsunami, then by abandonment. Its once vermilion torii gates had faded to rust, stone. Guardian statues lay toppled along cracked pathways, and protective barriers had eroded from neglect. Perfect conditions for supernatural exploitation. Issei extended shadow perception upward, mapping the complex's layout and identifying energy concentrations. Unlike the mountain shrine, which had maintained spiritual integrity despite abandonment, this temple radiated wrongness, natural sanctity systematically corrupted. Sacred geometry inverted to serve opposing purpose. The void taint had penetrated deeper, suggesting longer establishment or more intensive methodology. A teleportation circle formed nearby, depositing Valeria with characteristic precision. Moments later, Miyuki materialized from swirling cherry blossoms, her family's distinctive movement technique combining aesthetic beauty with practical efficiency. Northern perimeter secured, Miyuki reported immediately. Guards redirected to western approach through suggestion talismans. Effective duration approximately 40 minutes. Security barriers, Valeria inquired, already summoning detection magic to her fingertips. 3-tiered configuration, Issei answered before Miyuki could respond, shadows extending outward in sensory tendrils. Outer layer conventional supernatural restriction, standard anti-intrusion methodology. Middle layer void-infused repulsion specifically targeting living entities. Inner layer, he paused, shadows encountering unusual resistance. Anomalous, not void-based. Something. He trailed off, attention captured by a subtle distortion in the ambient energy patterns, not part of the barrier system but separate. Observing, analyzing. Something watched them with predatory focus, its presence concealed by sophisticated techniques that nearly escaped even his enhanced perception. We're being monitored, he stated quietly, shadows gathering protectively. Northwestern quadrant, approximately 70 meters distant. Non-void entity employing concealment methods beyond standard supernatural capabilities. Valeria immediately shifted to defensive posture, reality distorting energy crackling around her hands. Abaddon employs non-void assets. Unlikely, Miyuki responded, reaching for her bow with practiced calm. More probably a third faction's observer. Several organizations monitor dimensional anomalies. Issei's eyes narrowed, luminescent blue-white intensifying. G as he focused perception toward the concealed presence. The entity, realizing it had been detected, initiated movement, rapid repositioning with supernatural grace. But Issei had already calculated its trajectory. Intercept, he commanded, and shadow tendrils launched toward the moving distortion. What happened next occurred too quickly for normal perception to follow. The concealed entity abandoned stealth for speed, revealing itself as it dodged the shadow tendrils with preternatural agility, a humanoid figure wreathed in foxfire that left azure afterimages trailing behind impossible movements. It bounded between trees, across stone lanterns, along vertical surfaces with equal facility, each motion fluid and precisely calculated. Kitsune, Miyuki identified immediately, notching an arrow to her bow but holding fire. High level, judging by movement patterns. Multiple tails. Assassin, Issei added, reading intent from movement style. The Kitsune wasn't merely fleeing, it was repositioning for attack, each evasive maneuver bringing it incrementally closer through spiral trajectory. Valeria's hands traced complex patterns, reality rippling around her fingertips. Permission to neutralize. Negative, Issei replied, calculating optimal response. Information gathering takes priority over elimination. He stepped forward, shadows gathering into tendrils that stretched outward, not to capture but to form a complex three-dimensional grid, not where the Kitsune was but where it would be, based on movement algorithms Issei had computed from observed patterns. The trap closed with perfect timing. Shadow tendrils converging from multiple vectors. The Kitsune, recognizing imminent capture, abandoned evasion for direct confrontation. It launched toward Issei with explosive acceleration. Form shifting mid-leap from humanoid to vulpine, a fox composed of living flame, 9 tails streaming behind it like comets. Spectral fangs aimed directly for Issei's throat, fox fur. Burning away shadow tendrils that attempted interception. Issei remained motionless until the precise moment of optimal vulnerability, when the Kitsune had fully committed to its attack trajectory and could no longer adjust. Then he moved with calculated efficiency, one hand rising to intercept the fox's lunge while shadows formed a secondary containment sphere around both of them. His palm connected with the fox's chest, shadow energy pulsing outward to neutralize fox fire without harming the creature itself. The impact redirected momentum, transforming lethal lunge into controlled tumble. That ended with the Kitsune pinned beneath Issei's hand, 9 tails splayed outward, vulpine form gradually returning to humanoid. Neutralized, Issei announced calmly, maintaining pressure as the Kitsune's form solidified into that of a young woman with distinctive vulpine features, amber eyes with vertical pupils, small pointed ears visible through straight black hair, facial structure suggesting both human and fox ancestry. Release or kill, the Kitsune stated flatly, voice accented but precise. Holding positions invite counterattack. As if to demonstrate, fox fire ignited around her free hand, forming into claws that slashed toward Issei's face with blinding speed. Shadows intercepted automatically, forming a shield that absorbed the attack without Issei's conscious direction. Wise. Tem managed defense protocols responding to detected threat. Counterattack predicted and neutralized, Issei replied, maintaining his hold. Third attempt inadvisable. The Kitsune's eyes narrowed, studying him with recalculating assessment. Then, surprising everyone, she laughed, a short, sharp sound containing genuine amusement. Efficiency matches reports, she acknowledged, ceasing resistance. Shadow Monarch proves worthy of observation. Miyuki approached cautiously, bow still ready but aimed slightly away, professional caution rather than immediate threat. Kitsune assassin, she addressed their captive directly. Contracted or factional, Xiaoyu serves interests of balance, the Kitsune, Xiaoyu, replied, speaking of herself in third person with formal cadence. When shadows rise and void hungers, scales require weight. Cryptic mysticism poorly masks evasion, Miyuki noted dryly. Valeria circled to Issei's left, maintaining tactical positioning that kept all approaches covered. She's Chinese, she observed. Huli Jing rather than Japanese Kitsune, despite similar manifestation. Likely connected to the ancient fox clans of the Shengqing celestial bureaucracy. Xiaoyu's amber eyes flickered toward Valeria. Genuine surprise briefly visible. Devil Princess knows obscure lore. Unexpected depth beneath fallen stars' light. I've had centuries to study, Valeria replied simply. Your presence here suggests Shengqing awareness of our conflict with Abaddon. official intervention or independent assessment. Rather than answering directly, Xiao Yu returned her attention to Issei. Shadow Monarch holds with unnecessary gentleness. Killing intent absent despite assassination attempt. Curious restraint from darkness incarnate. Issei studied her with analytical intensity. Shadow perception revealing complex energy patterns flowing beneath her physical form. Ancient fox magic interwoven with celestial energies, multiple enchantments layered throughout her being. Power carefully regulated through disciplined control systems. You weren't attempting actual assassination, he stated with certainty. Testing response parameters rather than seeking elimination. Your attack trajectory included 3 deliberate suboptimal adjustments. Xiao Yu's expression remained neutral, but her 9 tails, visible only to supernatural perception, twitched in what might have been approval. Shadow sees clearly. Fox tests thoroughly. Nature of both. Issei released his hold, stepping back while maintaining shadow barrier around them all. State your purpose explicitly. Me constraints prevent extended verbal circumnavigation. The kitsune rose with fluid grace, straightening garments that combined traditional Chinese design with practical modernization, flowing silk tunic over reinforced leggings. Ceremonial sash concealing multiple weapon sheaths, jade ornaments that Issei's perception identified as foci for concentrated magic. Shangqing Celestial Court observe dimensional disturbances with concern, she stated, abandoning cryptic phrasing for direct communication. Void Walker's activities disrupt cosmic balance. Shadow Monarch's emergence represents potential counterbalance or catastrophic acceleration, depending on development path. She bowed formally, precise angle indicating professional respect rather than subordination. This one serves as designated observer, tasked with assessing Shadow Monarch's nature and intentions through direct interaction. By attacking him, Miyuki asked skeptically, lowering her bow slightly but maintaining ready position. Combat reveals truth beyond words, Xiao Yu replied simply. Shadow Monarch demonstrated restraint, precision, tactical assessment prioritizing information over elimination. Valuable data points. Issei considered her explanation, finding it consistent with observed behavior and energy patterns. More importantly, his shadow perception detected no deception in her statement, though considerable omission. Likely regarding secondary objectives or factional complexities within her celestial bureaucracy. A notification appeared. Quest update. Bonus objective revealed. Bonus object. Form alliance with celestial observer. Reward. Enhanced diplomatic capabilities plus intelligence network access. Your assessment will be reported to Shangqing authorities, Issei surmised. Influencing potential intervention decisions regarding Abaddon's incursion. Xiao Yu nodded once, crisp and precise. Celestial bureaucracy moves with deliberate caution. Direct intervention requires substantial justification. Shadow Monarch represents unknown variable requiring categorization before policy determination. We have more immediate concerns, Valeria interjected, gesturing toward the temple complex. The thinning point approaches critical threshold within 3 hours. Issei nodded, decision formed. Xiao Yu, your observational objectives align temporarily with our operational parameters. I propose limited cooperation during this specific intervention, providing you direct assessment opportunity while we neutralize the dimensional thinning. The kitsune considered this with analytical intensity. Amber eyes revealing complex calculations behind apparent simplicity. Acceptable arrangement, she finally agreed. This one will observe without interference unless preservation requires action. Unless preservation requires action, Miyuki repeated skeptically. Conveniently subjective criterion. All criteria contain subjective elements, Xiao Yu responded, 9 tails BR. I.e. fly visible as they fanned outward in what might have been defensive posture or simple irritation. Shrine Maiden's certainty masks similar flexibility. Before Miyuki could respond, Issei intervened. Operational timeline requires immediate action. Interpersonal dynamics resolved later. He dissolved the shadow barrier, redirecting gathered darkness into sensory tendrils that extended toward the temple complex. With 4 supernaturally capable individuals now involved, tactical approaches required recalibration. Xiao Yu's abilities. Fox fire manipulation, enhanced mobility, probable illusio. N capacities, added new variables to consider. Revised approach, he announced. Miyuki maintains original responsibility for barrier neutralization. Valeria handles void constructs if encountered. I will address the thinning point directly. He glanced at Xiaoyu. Observer positions according to preference, maintaining sufficient distance to avoid interference with primary operations. Xiaoyu nodded agreement, amber eyes studying him with undiminished intensity. Fox moves like shadow when required. Presence remains unobtrusive. With operational parameters established, they began their approach to the temple complex. Miyuki took point, specialized talismans prepared to disable the outer barrier layer. Valeria maintained center position, reality distortion magic ready for immediate deployment. Issei followed, shadows extended in constant sensory sweep while simultaneously preparing combat configurations. Xiaoyu seemed to simply fade into peripheral awareness, not invisible but persistently overlooked. A specialized perceptual manipulation technique Issei found professionally impressive. They reached the first barrier without incident, Miyuki's talismans deactivating specific Sei G-ments through counter-harmonic resonance rather than brute force neutralization. The technique created temporary passages without disrupting the overall barrier structure, subtle infiltration rather than obvious breach. First layer circumvented, Miyuki announced quietly. Passage stability approximately 8 minutes before self-repair initiates. They proceeded through the opening, entering the temple grounds proper. Abandoned offering halls stood open to elements, prayer bells hung silent and corroded, stone paths cracked where tsunami waters had once receded. Yet beneath this physical deterioration, Issei's shadow perception detected purposeful corruption, spiritual energy systematically inverted, sacred geometries reconfigured to channel void essence rather than divine connection. The desecration is methodical, Valeria observed, heterochromatic eyes tracking energy flows visible only to supernatural perception. Each corrupted element serves specific function in the thinning process. Second barrier approaching, Miyuki warned, producing different talismans, these inscribed with characters that seem to shift and reform under direct observation. Void-infused components require specialized countermeasures. While Miyuki worked on the second barrier, Issei expanded shadow perception throughout the complex, creating comprehensive tactical map. The thinning point Itzel, F radiated from the main worship hall, once dedicated to local kami but now serving as focal point for dimensional corruption. Multiple void signatures registered within, constructs similar to those ENC entered at Kuo Academy and the Mountain Shrine, but more fully manifested, more permanently established in this reality. 8 void constructs within the main hall, he reported. 3 elite class, 5 standard configuration. Additional void signatures beneath the structure, likely crystalline anchors similar to previous installation. Significantly stronger presence than the Mountain Shrine, Valeria noted with concern. This thinning point has progressed further toward stabilization. Xiaoyu materialized beside them, her perceptual manipulation temporarily suspended as she provided unexpected input. Temple contains human prisoners. 3 souls, basement level. Life force harvested systematically to accelerate thinning. Issei's eyes narrowed, new information altering tactical considerations. Confirmation. The kitsune nodded once, precise and certain. Fox fire reveals life essence distinctions. Human souls flicker differently from constructed entities. No deception possible. This changes our approach, Miyuki stated, finishing her work on the second barrier. Human hostages require extraction priority. Agreed, Issei confirmed without hesitation. The cold analyte, ICAL efficiency that had characterized his rebirth as Shadow Monarch had never excluded ethical considerations, merely reorganized their implementation within tactical frameworks. Revised operational structure. Miyuki and Valeria neutralize void constructs in main hall. I will extract human captives from lower level before addressing thinning mechanism directly. Division reduces tactical effectiveness, Valeria cautioned. Human preservation justifies tactical compromise, Issei replied simply. A notification appeared. Special quest alert. Innocent lives. Objective. Rescue human captives unharmed. Reward. Increased shadow extraction efficiency plus humanity retention. Accept. YN. Issei accepted immediately, already reconfiguring shadow deployment patterns to accommodate rescue OP. Rations alongside primary mission objectives. What role for observer? Xiaoyu inquired, amber eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts regarding this development. Information provision appreciated, Issei acknowledged. Further tactical intelligence regarding captive condition and guard deployment would facilitate optimal extraction methodology. The Kitsune considered this request briefly before nodding. This one will scout basement level. Return with details before main operation commences. Without waiting for confirmation, she dissolved into Foxfire, form shifting to Vulpine Configura. Tian before disappearing through cracks in the temple floorboards, her ninetails the last visible component before complete concealment. Can she be trusted? Miyuki asked quietly, preparing final talismans for the third barrier. Unknown, Issei replied honestly. But tactical assessment suggests alignment of immediate interests. Celestial bureaucracies generally prioritize human protection within cosmic balance frameworks. Generally, Valeria emphasized, political factions within Shangqing hierarchy maintain varying interpretations of intervention protocols. Some prioritize cosmic harmony over individual lives. Noted, Issei acknowledged. Contingency planning adjusted accordingly. They continued toward the main worship hall, Miyuki's barrier techniques creating passage thrug. The final protective layer. This one composed of strange geometries that seem to extend in directions physical space shouldn't permit. Unlike the previous barriers, this one registered as neither VOID-based nor conventional supernatural construction, but something older, more fundamental to reality itself. This barrier predates current occupation, Miyuki whispered, fingers tracing complex patterns along symbolic configurations. Ancient protective measure inverted to prevent escape rather than entry. Possibly original temple protection repurposed. Temporal manipulation involved, Valeria added. Heterochromatic eyes tracking energy flows. Limited time loop components creating perpetual containment without continuous energy expenditure. Sophisticated work. Abaddon's capabilities exceed previous assessment parameters. Issei noted, filing this information for future consideration. Enhanced opponent capabilities necessitated accelerated personal development. As Miyuki completed the final barrier neutralization, Xiaoyu rematerialized beside them, reforming from Foxfire with unusual urgency in her normally measured movements. Situation deteriorated, she reported immediately. Human captives connected directly to thinning mechanism. Life force extraction accelerated to critical threshold. Estimated survival duration, 27 minutes. Issei absorbed this information with outward calm despite internal recalibration. Void construct deployment. 2 elites guarding captives. 3 standard configurations maintaining extraction apparatus. Remaining construct. In main hull preparing ritual components. The thinning approaches completion, Valeria realized. They're accelerating the timeline, just as at Kuo Academy. They detected our barrier neutralization, Miyuki concluded grimly. We've lost the element of surprise. Issei assessed the altered situation, calculating success probabilities for various tactical approaches. Direct confrontation WITH all void constructs simultaneously while attempting captive extraction presented substantial risk. Dividing forces reduced combat effectiveness but increased operational flexibility. A third option crystallized. Shadow domain, he stated, decision reached. Full manifestation rather than limited deployment. Within my domain, tactical advantages multiply while void capabilities diminish. Energy expenditure substantial, Valeria cautioned. Maintaining domain while conducting extraction and thinning neutralization may exceed current capacity. Necessary risk, Issei replied. Captive will not survive alternative approaches. Without waiting for further discussion, he stepped forward, shadows gathering around him with increasing density. Unlike previous domain establishments, which had been measured and controlled, this manifestation channeled maximum available power, darkness flowing from him in waves that expanded outward at supernatural velocity. Arise, domain of the Shadow Monarch. His voice resonated with harmonic undertones as reality itself bent to his will. The temple complex, buildings, grounds, surrounding areas, transformed as shadow overwhelmed physical parameters. Walls became transparent to his perception while remaining solid, ceilings dissolved into star-studded void, floors transformed to reflective obsidian. Distance and spatial relationships remain. Ned technically unchanged yet simultaneously more malleable, responsive to his directed will. Within his domain, Issei's perception expanded exponentially. He immediately located the human captives, Individuals suspended within crystalline chambers in the basement level, life essence being systematically extracted through tubes of solidified void energy. The void constructs guarding them registered as bright disruptions in the shadow landscape, entities of opposing essence temporarily disoriented by the domain's establishment. Miyuki, Valeria, Issei commanded, voice carrying perfectly despite distance. Neutralize void constructs in main hall. Priority target. Ritual components. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he dissolved into shadow, flowing through his domain with perfect efficiency, movement unbound by conventional physical limitations. Simultaneously, he summoned his shadow army, elite soldiers materializing throughout the complex in strategic positions to support the operation. Reaching the basement level in moments, Issei reformed before the crystalline chambers. The void constructs guarding them had recovered from initial disorientation and moved to intercept hulking entities composed of crystallized darkness with limbs that terminated in wicked geometric shapes rather than conventional hands or feet. Arise, Issei commanded, and shadow soldiers engaged immediately, the crystalline devil shadow and void sentinel moving with coordinated precision to occupy the elite constructs while Issei focused on the extraction apparatus. The human captives hung suspended in translucent crystalline prisons, an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a teenage boy, all in varying states of consciousness as their life essence drained through tubes of solidified void. Their remaining vitality registered to Issei's perception as flickering flames gradually diminishing toward extinction. Standard void constructs moved to protect the extraction apparatus, but encountered the Exorcist Shadow and Void Enforcer, specialized combat units deployed specifically to counter their capabilities. Battle erupted throughout the basement level, shadow soldiers engaging void constructs with tactical precision while Issei approached the crystalline chambers. Direct physical disruption would likely kill the captives immediately. The extraction process had integrated too thoroughly with their biological systems. Instead, Issei extended shadow tendrils directly into the apparatus, utilizing his newly developed void manipulation capabilities to interface with the extraction mechanism. A notification appeared. Specialized skill activated. Void interface. Caution. Corruption risk present. Continue. YN. Issei confirmed without hesitation, shadows penetrating deeper into the crystalline structures. Within his domain, his control over darkness approached absolute. Even void-based systems could be influenced, redirected, subverted to his purpose. The extraction process began to reverse. Life essence flowing back into the human captives rather than toward the thinning mechanism. Above, he sensed Miyuki and Valeria engaging void constructs in the main hall, her rear techniques combining with reality distortion to devastating effect against entities unprepared for coordinated assault. Xiaoyu remained in observation position, though her foxfire occasionally manifested to redirect void energy away from the combatants. Minimal intervention maintaining plausible deniability while still supporting the operation. The crystalline chambers began to crack as Issei systematically dismantled their functional components. Shadow tendrils supported the unconscious captives, preventing them from collapsing as their prisons disintegrated. The void constructs garden. The apparatus fought with increasing desperation, sensing the disruption of their primary objective, but Issei's shadow soldiers maintained containment with unwavering efficiency. As the final crystal fragments fell away, Issei directed shadow platforms to form beneath each rescued captive, stable surfaces that would transport them safely out of the complex once the immediate threat was neutralized. A familiar void signature suddenly flared on the upper level, distinctive energy pattern Issei recognized from previous encounters. Emissary, he identified, redirecting sensory shadows toward the main hall. The void emissary had arrived. The same crystalline entity from the mountain shrine, now fully materialized and radiating significantly enhanced power. It stood within the ritual circle at the temple's center. Geometric hands raised as it channeled massive void energy directly into the thinning mechanism. You intervened too late, Shadow Monarch. Its voice resonated throughout the domain despite distance and barriers. The thinning stabilizes. The pathway forms. Issei completed the captive extraction process, confirming life signs stabilizing as extraction damage gradually reversed. With the humans secured, he dissolved into shadow once more, flowing upward toward the main confrontation. In the main hall, the situation had deteriorated. Despite Miyuki's barrier techniques and Valerius' reality distortion, the emissary's arrival had shifted combat dynamics significantly. Void constructs fought with renewed coordination, forming geometric patterns that amplified their individual capabilities through collective resonance. Issei reformed beside his allies, shadows gathering into combat configuration around him. Captives secured, he reported. Extraction process reversed. Recovery probable. Relief flashed briefly across Miyuki's features despite the tactical situation. The thinning. Approaching critical threshold, Valeria answered before Issei could respond. Reality distorting energy crackling around her hands as she maintained defensive barrier against void constructs. The emissary's arrival accelerated stabilization exponentially. The void miss. Eri stood at the center of the former worship hall, crystal features configured in what might have been triumph. Shadow Monarch, it acknowledged. Your compassion for lesser beings proves costly. Threshold approaches while you rescue insignificant lives. Tactical priorities reflect fundamental values, Issei replied calmly, shadows extending throughout the hull in preparation for his next move. Compassion and power are not mutually exclusive parameters. The emissary's features shifted, reconfiguring into something approximating amusement. Philosophical differences aside, the outcome remains unchanged. This thinning point will stabilize. The array continues its formation. Abaddon approaches. Rather than responding verbally, Issei activated his most recently unlocked ability, Shadow Binding. Darkness condensed around the void emissary, forming chains of concentrated shadow that attempted to immobilize its crystalline form. Simultaneously, his shadow soldiers engaged the Rima, ining void constructs with renewed intensity, drawing them away from the central ritual area. Miyuki, Issei directed, barrier containment around the thinning point. Valeria, reality distortion Fok, used on severing dimensional connections. Both women moved immediately to implement his instructions, Miyuki deploying specialized talismans in geometric arrangement around the ritual area, Valeria handling her unique bloodline magic into the fabric of reality itself. While they worked, Issei maintained pressure on the void emissary, shadow chains tightening despite its attempts to break free. Impressive coordination, the emissary acknowledged, crystal limbs straining against shadow bindings. Yet fundamentally insufficient. The thinning has already achieved 90% stabilization. Current stability parameters irrelevant, Issei replied, shadows darkening as he channeled additional power into the binding. When methodology changes. Before the emissary could respond, Issei implemented his actual strategy, not prevention of stabilization, but redirection of its target coordinates. Shadow tendrils infiltrated the ritual circle, altering symbolic configurations at fundament levels while maintaining surface appearance of unchanged functionality. The void energy continued flowing, the thinning continued progressing, but its dimensional alignment shifted incrementally with each modified symbol. The emissary, realizing Issei's true intention too late, renewed its struggles against the shadow binding. Stop. You cannot comprehend the consequences of misdirection. Fully comprehended, Issei corrected, completing the final modifications as Miyuki's barriers locked the ritual configuration in place. Redirecting dimensional pathway from Earth to isolated pocket dimension. Controlled detonation rather than planetary compromise. Valeria's heterochromatic eyes widened with realization as she maintained reality distortion around the ritual area. You're creating a dimensional dead end, a pathway leading nowhere significant. Precisely, Issei confirmed, allowing stabilization while rendering it strategically irrelevant. The emissary's crystalline form gone to crack under combined pressure of shadow binding and its own desperate struggles. You disrupt the array's integrity. The remaining points cannot compensate for directional aberration. That, Issei noted with cold precision, is entirely the point. The ritual circle flared with blinding intensity as the thinning reached full stabilization, but rather than creating pathway to Abaddon's realm, it connected to empty dimensional pocket Issei had effectively created through symbolic reconfiguration. Void energy poured through the completed connection, but found nothing to consume, nowhere to expand, no realm to corrupt. A notification confirmed success. Objective completed. Thinning point neutralized. Bonus technique unlocked. Dimensional redirection. Warning. Void backlash imminent. Clear the temple, Issei commanded, releasing his shadow binding as the emissary began to disintegrate, void energy recoiling through the failed connection, consuming its own anchors in cascading failure. Dimensional collapse approaching. Miyuki and Valeria needed no further prompting, immediately moving toward the exit while maintaining protective barriers around themselves. Issei remained momentarily, shadows extending to recover his deployed soldiers while simultaneously confirming the captives. Shadow platforms were already moving them safely away from the complex. The void emissary, form deteriorating rapidly as connection failure cascaded through its structure, fixed crystalline eyes upon Issei with what might have been genuine respect. Cleverly played, Shadow Monarch, Chi acknowledged as fractures spread across its surface. But games continue, pieces move, Abaddon adapts, as do I, Issei replied simply, shadows withdrawing as he prepared to depart. The emissary's features shifted one final time, reconfiguring into something approaching a smile. Indeed, perhaps that is why he fears you more than the original. Before Issei could respond to this unexpected statement, the emissary shattered completely, crystalline fragments collapsing inward before dissipating into void particles that the failed connection immediately consumed. The dimensional thinning, now fully stabilized but connecting to nowhere significant, began collapsing upon itself, energy folding inward in geometric patterns that would eventually implode the entire temple complex. Issei dissolved into shadow, flowing away from the impending collapse with maximum efficiency. His domain remained established throughout the complex, allowing him complete awareness of all occupants, Miyuki and Valeria already reaching safe distance. The human captives secured on shadow platforms beyond the temple grounds, void constructs disintegrating as their anchoring presence dissolved. And Xiaoyu, the Itsune observer who had maintained her position throughout the confrontation, recording events with analytical precision while offering minimal but strategic interference when critical moments emerged. Reforming at safe distance alongside Miyuki and Valeria, Issei gradually dismissed his shadow domain, reality reasserting normal parameters as darkness receded. The temple complex imploded with rising silence, void energy consuming itself rather than releasing destructive force outward, the entire structure simply ceasing to exist rather than exploding in conventional terms. Where the temple had stood moments before, only an empty clearing remained. Trees, stones, even air itself seeming newer, fresher, as if cleansed of long-standing corruption. Dimensional reset, Valeria identified with professional appreciation. The pocket dimension collapsed completely, taking the thinning point and all void contamination with it. Elegant solution. The captives, Miyuki asked immediately, practical concerns taking precedence over theoretical appreciation. Secure, Issei confirmed, gesture indicating the shadow platforms now settling gently on the ground nearby. Life force extraction reversed successfully. Recovery probable with proper medical attention and spiritual cleansing. Miyuki nodded sharply, already moving toward the rescued humans with talismans prepared for preliminary spiritual purification. While she attended the captives, Valeria approached Issei with analytical intensity in her heterochromatic gaze. That was, she paused, selecting terminology carefully, unprecedented. Dimensional redirection through symbolic reconfiguration requires mathematical precision beyond most supernatural entities' capabilities. Even high-class devils would struggle with calculations of that complexity. System assistance provided computational framework, Issei explained, shadows settling around him as energy reserves gradually replenished. Pattern recognition combine, with extracted knowledge from previous emissary. Before Valeria could respond, Foxfire materialized beside them, coalescing into Xiaoyu's humanoid form. The kitsune's amber eyes studied Issei with newfound intensity. Nine tails momentarily visible before fading from perception. Shadow shows unexpected depth, she stated without preamble. Compassion beneath darkness. Power serving protection rather than domination. Interesting contradiction. Not contradiction, Issei corrected. Integration. Different aspects of unified whole. Xiaoyu considered this response with unreadable expression. Celestial Court will receive thorough assessment. Shadow Monarch classification. Complex but non-hostile toward cosmic balance. She bowed formally, precise angle indicating professional respect, with newly added element of personal acknowledgement. This one's observation continues, but parameters adjusted. Meaning, Valeria inquired. Observer becomes potential ally, Xiaoyu clarified. Fox follows Shadow's path temporarily. Interests align regarding void threat. A notification appeared. Bonus objective completed. Alliance with Celestial Observer formed. Reward. Enhanced diplomatic capabilities unlocked. New intelligence network access available. Level up. Current level 9. Issei acknowledged both the notification and Xiaoyu's statement with a slight nod. Practical ally. Ants based on shared immediate objectives. Acceptable arrangement. The kitsune's lips curved in what might have been amusement. Shadow speaks with cold precision but acts with underlying warmth. Fascinating duality. Before Issei could respond, Miyuki rejoined them, having stabilized the rescued captives. Local authorities have been anonymously notified, she reported. Medical assistance approximately 12 minutes away. We should depart before conventional response arrives. Issei nodded agreement. Rendezvous at secondary location as planned. Tactical assessment and future operations discussion to follow. As they prepared to depart, Miyuki utilizing her movement technique, Valeria summoning teleportation circle, Xiaoyu dissolving into Fox fire, Issei took one final moment to survey the cleared temple site. The void thinning had been neutralized, human captives rescued, immediate threat contained. Yet the emissary's final words lingered in his thoughts. Perhaps that is why he fears you more than the original. The implications suggested complexities beyond current understanding, relationships between Abaddon and the original Shadow Monarch that historical records hadn't captured. Dynamics that might prove strategically significant as conflict escalated. More information required, more power needed, more growth essential. Shadows enveloped him completely, transporting him away from the operation site as authorities approached in distance. The Shadow Monarch's work continued, one thinning point neutralized, others remaining to be addressed, Abaddon's ultimate incursion still to be prevented. And somewhere within the calculating efficiency that now characterized his existence, something else developed in parallel, compassion that transcended tactical consideration. Ethical frameworks that survived death and rebirth, humanity persisting beneath Shadow's embrace. Not contradiction, but integration. Different aspects of unified whole. The Shadow Monarch evolved, and within that evolution, Issei Hyodo remained. The Illuminated Path's regional headquarters occupied the 70th floor of an ultramodern Tokyo skyscraper, outwardly a legitimate pharmaceutical research corporation. Inwardly the operational center for Japan's most sophisticated supernatural monitoring organization. Founded centuries ago as traditional monster hunters, the group had evolved with technology and globalization into something far more dangerous. Methodical researchers who systematically deconstructed supernatural phenomena into exploitable resources. 3 days after the Sendai operation, Issei stood atop an adjacent building, shadow perception extended toward the Illuminated Path facility. Architectural schematics obtained through Xiaoyu's celestial intelligence. CE network revealed standard corporate layout with significant modifications, reinforced security systems, specialized containment chambers, research laboratories equipped with technologies designed specifically for supernatural analysis. Their defensive capabilities are substantial, Valeria noted, joining him at the rooftop edge. Multiple layers of both technological and mystical countermeasures. They've clearly encountered various supernatural entities and adapted accordingly. Yet no specific shadow countermeasures detected, Issei observed. Their encounters with previous Shadow Monarch either unrecorded or insufficiently analyzed. Tactical advantage, Xiaoyu added from her position slightly behind them, amber eyes tracking security patrol patterns with predatory focus. Humans expect fire, water, conventional magic. Shadow moves differently, bypasses assumptions. The 4 days since forming their tentative alliance had established unexpected operational compatibility. Kitsune's intelligence gathering complemented Issei's strategic planning, her specialized knowledge filling contextual gaps regarding various supernatural factions. More importantly, her celestial Ort connections had identified the Illuminated Path as possessing artifacts directly connected to the original Shadow Monarch. Items that might provide critical insights regarding Abaddon's ultimate objectives and potential countermeasures. Miyuki's absence reduces mystical counterbalance capabilities, Valeria noted. The Shrine Maiden had returned temporarily to Kyoto, consulting ancestral archives regarding the Great Sacrifice, referenced in fragmentary records. Adjusted operational parameters compensate adequately, Issei replied. 3-person infiltration maintains optimal balance between capability and detectability. Infiltration window approaches, Xiaoyu observed, indicating security patrol reaching predetermined position. Optimal entry point confirmed. Server room ventilation, northeastern quadrant. Issei nodded, shadows gathering around all 3 of them in preparation. Shadow transport available for both. Unlike their previous operation, Valeria accepted without hesitation. Teleportation circles would trigger detection systems. Shadow movement provides superior stealth capabilities. Xiaoyu simply nodded once, Ninetales briefly visible as Foxfire integrated with gathering shadows. Mission parameters confirmed, Issei stated. Primary objective: artifact recovery from secure vault, sublevel 3. Secondary objective: intelligence gathering regarding illuminated paths knowledge of Shadow Monarch and Abaddon. Tertiary objective: undetected extraction without casualties. Humans research dangerous knowledge without understanding, Xiaoyu noted, amber eyes momentarily solemn. Fox prefers no blood spilled despite foolishness. Agreed, Issei confirmed. Non-lethal methodologies prioritized throughout operation. Shadows enveloped all 3 completely, transforming them into darkness that flowed across rooftops toward the target building. Issei's shadow transportation had evolved significantly with recent level gains, capable of carrying multiple passengers with minimal energy expenditure, maintaining solid cohesion even when traversing brightly lit areas, adapting to defensive measures encountered during transit. They reached the ventilation access point without detection, shadows flowing through narrow openings before reforming inside the server room, a climate-controlled chamber filled with humming equipment, blinking status lights providing minimal illumination that suited their purposes perfectly. Initial infiltration successful, Issei confirmed quietly, shadow perception extending throughout the facility. Security. Systems operating at standard parameters. No supernatural detection protocols activated. Overconfidence, Xiaoyu observed with subtle satisfaction. Humans believe technology sufficient against all threats. Their mistake, Valeria agreed, heterochromatic eyes adjusting instantly to the dim lighting. Though their technological integration has advanced considerably since my last encounter with this organization. We should proceed cautiously. Issei nodded agreement, shadows extending as sensory probes throughout nearby corridors and chambers. The facility operated with skeleton crew at this late hour, security personnel making routine rounds, a few researchers working in specialized laboratories, maintenance staff performing scheduled system checks. None presented immediate threat. Several security checkpoints would require careful navigation. Sublevel access requires keycard and biometric authentication, he noted, identifying relevant security measures between their position and the target vault. Multiple potential approaches. Fox can acquire necessary credentials, Xiaoyu offered, amber eyes gleaming in the darkness. Security supervisor currently alone in monitoring station, 3rd floor. Illusion and memory manipulation sufficient for temporary cooperation. Unnecessary risk, Issei replied. Shadow infiltration provides direct access to security systems. Override protocols implementable through machine interface. To demonstrate, he extended shadow tendrils directly into the nearest server bank, darkness flowing through circuitry, interfacing with electronic systems on levels impossible for conventional hacking. Within his shadows, data flowed like water, security protocols appearing as simple barriers easily circumvented through dimensional manipulation rather than technical expertise. A notification confirmed success. Shadow tech interface activated. Security system access granted. New ability unlocked. Electronic shadow control. Security override implemented. Issei informed his companions. Surveillance cameras looping previous footage. Electronic locks temporarily reconfigured to accept shadow essence as authorization. Impressive adaptation, Valeria acknowledged. The original Shadow Monarch predated modern technology. Your integration of shadow manipulation with electronic systems represents evolutionary development beyond historical capabilities. They proceeded from the server room into main corridors, moving with supernatural stealth between security patrols. Issei's shadow perception provided comprehensive awareness of all facility occupants, allowing perfect timing of movements between observation points. When direct passage proved impossible, Shadows simply transported them through walls or floors, bypassing physical barriers entirely. Reaching the elevator bank that accessed sublevels, Issei interfaced directly with control systems, shadows flowing into electronic components, manipulating circuit. Ride override security protocols without triggering alarms. The elevator descended silently to sublevel 3, doors opening into dimly lit corridor lined with reinforced doors, each marked with alpha. Numeric designations rather than conventional labels. Vault location. Valeria inquired quietly. Western Quadrant. Xiaoyu replied before Issei could respond. Celestial Intelligence confirms Artie. Fact storage in specialized containment chamber designated SV7. Issei nodded confirmation as shadow perception mapped the sublevel layout. Detected. Substantial security measures surrounding Tarj. T-Vault. Both technological and mystical components integrated in layered configuration. They proceeded cautiously along the corridor, passing doors that Issei's enhanced senses identified as contain. Various supernatural items. Objects of power harvested from different traditions, entities trapped in specialized containment, equipment designed to analyze and replicate supernatural phenomena. Illuminated Paths collection reflected centuries of dedicated acquisition, systematic categorization of the paranormal into exploitable resources. Their understanding exceeds expected parameters. Issei noted as they approached the target vault. Methodology suggests practical application rather than mere theoretical knowledge. Illuminated Path evolved beyond simple hunters, Xiaoyu confirmed. Modern iteration seeks control mechanisms. Ways to harness supernatural forces through technological means. Dangerous ambition, Valeria observed. Particularly regarding entities like Abaddon, whose nature transcends conventional supernatural categories. They reached Vault SV7, reinforced door featuring multiple locking mechanisms, biometric scanners, and mystical wards inscribed directly into the metal surface. Unlike other containment units they'd passed, this vault radiated peculiar energy signature, not precisely void or shadow, but something adjacent to both, something ancient and carefully contained. Security configuration exceeds standard parameters, Issei observed, analyzing the integrated systems. Direct override difficult without triggering contingency protocols. Alternative approach required, Valeria suggested, studying the mystical inscriptions with analytical intensity. These wards incorporate elements from multiple traditions, Christian, Shinto, Hindu, even fragments of angelic script. Designed specifically to contain shadow essence. Shadow Monarch artifacts, Xiaoyu confirmed, amber eyes narrowed. Celestial intelligence accurate, items related to original Shadow's conflict with Void Walker. Issei extended shadow tendrils toward the vault door, testing defensive responses without direct engagement. The mystical wards reacted immediately, owing with soft blue light that repelled darkness without triggering broader alarm systems. Specialized containment rather than general security, designed specifically for shadow-based entities. Interesting, he noted. Defenses recognize shadow essence specifically. Targeted containment protocols. A notification appeared. Special challenge detected. Shadow containment vault. Reward for successful infiltration. Ancient shadow knowledge. Warning. Direct shadow approach ineffective. Issei considered tactical options, calculating success probabilities for various methodologies. Direct Dao manipulation faced specific countermeasures. Technological override encountered mystical barriers. Brute force would trigger facility-wide security response. Solution crystallized from unexpected direction. Xiaoyu. He addressed the Kitsune directly. Your fox fire. It registers as distinct supernatural category from shadow essence. The Kitsune's eyes widened slightly with understanding. Celestial fire categorized differently in mystical taxonomy. Wards specifically targeting shadow may not recognize fox fire as equivalent threat. Precisely, Issei confirmed. Probe the ward bound. Areas with minimal energy to test response parameters. Xiaoyu nodded, extending one hand toward the vault door. Fox fire ignited around her fingertips, azure flames that burned without heat, illuminating the corridor with ghostly light. She directed a thin stream of energy toward the edge of the mystical inscriptions, carefully monitoring defensive response. The wards remained dormant, recognizing Fox fire as different supernatural category, outside specific containment parameters. Boundary limitation confirmed, Xiaoyu reported with satisfaction. Wards specifically calibrated for shadow essence. Other supernatural energies processed through general security algorithms rather than specialized containment protocols. Valeria, Issei turned to the Devil Princess. Your reality distortee operates on fundamental dimensional principles rather than conventional magic. Combined with Fox Fire, can you create temporary access point? Valeria considered the theoretical framework, heteroc. Romantic eyes calculating complex magical equations with remarkable speed. Potentially. Fox Fire provides initial boundary penetration. Reality distortion expands the exception into functional access portal. Temporary but viable methodology. Proceed, Issei directed, already preparing shadow tendrils for immediate artifact retrieval once access established. Xiaoyu and Valeria moved into position on either side of the vault door, coordinating their distinct supernatural abilities with professional precision. Fox Fire flowed into the narrow gaps between ward inscriptions, creating hair-thin channels of non-shadow energy penetrating the defensive matrix. Simultaneously, Valeria channeled reality distortion along these pathways, carefully manipulating dimensional properties to expand exceptions into functional access portal. The combined technique produced remarkable results, mystical wards remaining technically intact while a shimmering oval portal formed within the vault door itself, bypassing physical and metaphysical barriers simultaneously. Beyond the portal, Issei glimpsed the vault's interior, clinically organized storage facility containing various artifacts arranged in specialized containment units. Portal stability approximately 90 seconds, Valeria reported, maintaining complex energy manipulation with visible concentration. Retrieval should proceed immediately. Issei extended shadow tendrils through the portal, not attempting direct entry himself, which might trigger remaining security measures, but sending controlled darkness to locate and extract target artifacts. His shadow perception identified multiple items radiating energy signatures similar to his own, objects connected to the original Shadow Monarch through resonance patterns that transcended conventional temporal limitations. 3 items registered as particularly significant. A dagger composed of compressed darkness, edge eternally sharp despite apparent age. A medallion bearing symbol, identical to the one occasionally appearing in system notifications. A crystalline orb containing what appeared to be miniature galaxy, stars and void in perfect balance. Shadow tendrils carefully extracted all 3 items simultaneously, drawing them through the portal without disturbing surrounding security systems. As the artifacts passed through the dimensional opening, Issei felt immediate Essence. Power recognizing power across temporal distance, shadow essence acknowledging shadow essence regardless of incarnation differences. A notification confirmed significance. Shadow Monarch artifacts recovered. Ancient knowledge becoming available. Warning. Full integration requires meditation. Artifacts secured. Issei confirmed as shadows delivered the items to his waiting hands. Portal closure can proceed. Valeria and Xiaoyu began carefully disengaging their combined technique, collapsing the dimensional opening methodically to avoid security disruption. As the portal shrank, to pinpoint before disappearing completely, the vault door remained apparently undisturbed, mystical wards intact, electronic systems functioning normally, no evidence of extraction visible to conventional surveillance. Secondary objective, Issei reminded, securing the artifacts within his shadow for safe transport. Intelligence gathering regarding illuminated paths knowledge. Central database located 1 level above. Xiaoyu reported, amber eyes still glowing slightly from Fox Fire utilization. Restricted access, isolated network, physical security rather than cloud storage. Logical precaution given research sensitivity. Valeria noted, though inconvenient for our purposes. Issei considered options briefly before deciding. Proceed to database location. Limited extraction of critical information rather than comprehensive download. Priority. Shadow Monarch references, Abaddon research, void physics documentation. They retraced their path to the elevator bank, maintaining perfect stealth between security patrols. Reaching sublevel 2 without incident, they navigated to the central database facility, a reinforced room containing specialized servers physically isolated from external networks. Security configuration standard for isolated systems, Issei observed, shadow perception mapping the room's defenses. No specialized supernatural countermeasures detected. Overconfidence in physical isolation. Xiao Yu noted with subtle satisfaction. Humans believe air gaps sufficient against all intrusion methodologies, utilizing the same approach that had granted access to other secured areas. Issei extended shadow tendrils beneath the door, manipulating electronic locks from inside. The door opened silently, admitting them to the climate-controlled server room without triggering alerts. Time-efficient extraction methodology required, Issei stated, approaching the main terminal. Direct shadow interface with data storage rather than conventional access protocols. He placed his palm against the primary server, shadows flowing from his fingertips directly into electronic components. Unlike conventional hacking, which required navigation through software security layers, shadow infiltration bypassed digital architecture entirely, darkness flowing through physical circuitry, interfacing directly with data storage media at material level. In format, ion appeared in Issei's consciousness like flowing river, research documents, experimental data, surveillance records, theoretical frameworks. He filtered the torrent with precise criteria, extracting only information directly relevant to their objectives while leaving system architecture intact. What he discovered exceeded expectations. The illuminated path possessed substantial knowledge regarding both Shadow Monarch and Abaddon, historical records, eyewitness accounts, artifact analysis, theoretical frameworks for their respective powers. More importantly, they had documented previous ICT cycles between the two entities, not merely the most recent confrontation 3,000 years ago, but multiple engagements across different historical periods, different geographical locations, different dimensional planes. A pattern emerged from the assembled data. Abaddon and Shadow Monarch locked in cyclical conflict across cosmic timeframe, each confrontation resulting in temporary resolution rather than permanent victory. The illuminated path had theorized this represented fundamental cosmic balance mechanism, darkness preserving against void, shadow maintaining existence against consumption. Neither capable of permanently eliminating the other without catastrophic universal consequences. Most significantly, they possessed partial documentation regarding the Great Sacrifice, referenced in other fragmentary records, the method by which the original Shadow Monarch had temporarily defeated Abaddon during their most recent conflict. The Shadow Division Ritual, a notification appeared, critical information discovered, Shadow Division Ritual documentation recovered. Warning. Incomplete information, further research required. Issei extracted the relevant data, Shadow Essence Abso. RBing information directly rather than requiring physical storage media. Simultaneously, he discovered illuminated path documentation regarding their acquisition of Shadow Monarch artifacts, Recovery F. ROM archaeological excavation in northern Japan approximately 70 years ago, subsequent research into their properties, failed attempts to harness their power for organizational purposes. Data extraction complete, he informed his companions, withdrawing shadows from the server systems. Significant intelligence acquired regarding historical conflict patterns and potential countermeasure methodologies. Escape trajectory remains clear, Xiao Yu reported, Amber Eyes tracking security patrol movements through supernatural awareness. Optimal extraction route unchanged from entry path. We should depart immediately, Valeria suggested, heterochromatic eyes revealing concern. Extended presence increases detection probability regardless of countermeasures. Issei nodded agreement, shish. Addos already gathering around all three in preparation for departure. They retraced their path through the facility with continued stealth, encountering no additional security challenges as they head their original entry point in the server room. Shadow transport available, Issei stated, darkness flowing around them more densely. Direct extraction to secondary location. Before either could respond, his enhanced senses detected sudden shift in facility energy patterns, not security alert but something more fundamental. Somewhere within the building, something had activated, something raw. Radiating void energy in distinctive pattern. Void signature detected, he reported immediately, shadow perception focusing on the disturbance. Sublevel 5, Central Chamber. Energy pattern consist, NT with thinning mechanism but significantly smaller scale. Impossible, Valeria responded, alarm evident in her tone. Thinning points require specific geographical parameters, celestial alignments. This building shouldn't support such phenomenon. Unless deliberately constructed to circumvent natural limitations, Issei countered, already extending shadow perception toward the disturbance. Artificial thinning point utilizing technological amplification rather than natural resonance. The illuminated path attempts to control what cannot be controlled, Xiaoyu stated grimly. Playing with forces beyond comprehension. The void signature intensified rapidly, energy patterns indicating accelerating thinning process rather than stable maintenance. Not planned activation but uncontrolled emergence. Laboratory containment failing against forces it attempted to harness. Evacuation required, Issei decided instantly. Facility containment protocols likely insufficient against uncontrolled void manifestation. We can't simply leave, Valeria argued. An uncontrolled thinning in central Tokyo could affect millions. Agreed, Issei confirmed. You both evacuate with artifacts. I will address the void manifestation directly. Unacceptable risk division, Xiaoyu countered immediately. Fox remains with Shadow. As do I, Valeria added without hesitation. Combined capabilities provide superior intervention potential. Issei considered arguing further but calculated time constraints prohibited extended discussion. Acceptable. Modified approach. Combined intervention. Followed by immediate extraction regardless of outcome. They moved with supernatural speed from server room toward emergency stairwell, bypassing conventional routes entirely as situation urgency overrode stealth prioritization. Reaching sublevel 5, they encountered immediate evidence of containment failure, emergency lighting activated, security personnel evacuating in organized but hurried fashion. Automated announcements requesting non-essential personnel proceed to designated safety zones. They've lost control of whatever they were attempting, Valeria observed as they navigated toward the central chamber. Standard containment protocols activated, insufficient response parameters given threat classification, Issei noted, shadow perception detecting void energy spreading beyond initial containment area. They reached the central chamber, a vast laboratory space filled with advanced technological equipment surrounding central containment unit. The unit itself had been designed as hexagonal chamber with transparent walls reinforced by both physical materials and mystical inscriptions. Within this chamber, reality itself appeared to fold inward around central point, a microscopic tear in dimensional fabric that nonetheless radiated void energy in quantities far exceeding its apparent size. Laboratory personnel in specialized protective equipment worked frantically at control stations, attempting to re-establish containment parameters while security teams established perimeter around the increasingly unstable phenomenon. They attempted to create controlled dimensional portal, Issei assessed. Analyzing visible equipment configurations. Utilizing recovered void crystals from thinning points as energy source. Reckless experimentation, Xiaoyu stated, Fox F. Ire igniting around her hands as she prepared for intervention. Humans believing technology can harness cosmic forces. We need to close that tear before it expands further, Valeria determined, reality distortion energy gathering around her fingertips. The containment chamber is already failing. Those fractures in the reinforced walls indicate structural integrity compromise at fundamental level. Issei analyzed the situation with shadow perception, calculating optimal intervention methodology. Direct confrontation would likely trigger security response, complicating already dangerous scenario. Covert intervention required precise application of specialized capabilities without revealing their presence. Shadow domain, he decided. Limited manifestation focused on containment chamber only. Stealth configuration rather than full battlefield transformation. Without waiting for acknowledgement, he extended shadows toward the laboratory floor, darkness flowing beneath notice of fraud. NTIC personnel toward the containment chamber. Unlike previous domain establishments, which had transformed entire areas, this manifestation targeted specific location with surgical precision, Shadow E. Zents infiltrating the containment chamber without disturbing surrounding space. Arise, domain of the Shadow Monarch, containment configuration. His voice remained physically silent, command Shan. Knelled through shadow essence directly rather than conventional vocalization. The containment chamber's interior darkened subtly. Not obvious transformation but fundamental shift in dimensional properties. Shadow essence establishing controlled environment around the void tier. Laboratory instruments registered the change immediately, readings fluctuating as monitoring systems detected unexpected energy signature interfacing with the void manifestation. Personnel responded with confusion, adjusting equipment parameters to compensate for readings they couldn't properly interpret. Void stabilization initiated, Issei reported. Maintaining precise shadow control around the dimensional tier. Expansion rate decreasing but not yet reversed. Additional intervention required, Valeria assessed. Heterochromatic eyes tracking energy patterns with specialized perception. The tear has progressed beyond point where simple containment can resolve destabilization. Targeted extraction methodology, Issei decided. Shadows darkening around the void tier. Similar to shadow extraction but applied to void essence directly. Extremely dangerous, Xiaoyu cautioned, amber eyes revealing genuine concern. Void extraction without proper preparation risks contamination at fundamental level. Calculated risk necessity, Issei replied, already implementing the procedure. Shadow tendrils extended directly into the dimensional tear. Darkness interfacing with void in controlled pattern. Unlike conventional shadow extraction, which harvested essence from defeated entities, this procedure PTED to draw void energy itself from active dimensional breach, reversing the thinning process through direct manipulation. A notification appeared. Warning. Experimental procedure detected. Void extraction from active breach. Corruption risk. 64%. Continue. YN. Issei confirmed without hesitation, shadow tendrils penetrating deeper into the void tier. Laboratory personnel continued working frantically at control stations, unaware of the invisible intervention occurring within their containment chamber. Monitoring equipment registered energy fluctuations but couldn't properly categorize. The shadow essence now interfacing directly with void manifestation. The extraction procedure progressed with agonizing slowness, void energy resisting shadow manipulation, dimensional tear maintaining integrity despite Issei's efforts. Strain built within his system as corruption risk increased with extended exposure, void particles attempting to contaminate shadow essence through proximity alone. Support required, he acknowledged. Voice tight with concentration. Void resistance inadequate for extended procedure. Valeria moved immediately, channeling reality distortion toward the containment chamber. Her unique bloodline magic affected the tear's dimensional properties directly, not closing it forcibly but altering its fundamental stability parameters, making it more susceptible to Issei's extraction methodology. Simultaneously, Xiaoyu extended fox fire in carefully controlled streams, celestial flames forming protective barrier between void essence and shadow tendrils, reducing contamination risk through elemental opposition. The combined technique created synergistic effect, each supernatural capability complementing the others in precisely calculated pattern. Laboratory P. Personal finally noticed the unauthorized intervention, monitoring equipment registering multiple unknown energy signatures interfacing with the containment breach. Security teams began moving toward T. Air position as researchers initiated emergency protocols designed for supernatural intrusion. Extraction approaching completion, Issei reported, shadows drawing final void particles from the dimensional tier. Facility response incoming. Extraction window closing. 90 seconds until security interception, Xiaoyu calculated, fox fire intensifying as she prepared for potential confrontation. Unnecessary risk, Valeria determined. The tear is nearly closed. Priority should be artifact preservation and extracted data security. Issei completed the void extraction procedure as the dimensional tear collapsed completely, final particles absorbed into shadow essence for controlled neutralization. The containment chamber returned to normal parameters, monitoring equipment registering. Successful breach closure without understanding intervention methodology. A notification confirmed success. Void extraction complete. Corruption contained. Purification required. New ability unlocked. Dimensional breach repair. Warning. Security response imminent. Mission complete, Issei stated, withdrawing shadow domain from the containment chamber as laboratory personnel stared in confusion at suddenly normalized readings. Immediate extraction required. Shadows enveloped all three completely, transporting them directly through facility infrastructure toward exterior extraction point. Security teams arrived moments too late, finding only empty space where monitoring equipment had detected unauthorized energy signatures seconds before. They materialized atop neighboring building. The same location from which they had initiated infiltration hours earlier. Dawn approached on eastern horizon, painting Tokyo's skyline in golden light that contrasted with the shadows still swirling around them. Successful operation despite complications, Valeria assessed, heterochromatic eyes monitoring the illuminated path facility for pursuit indicators. Artifacts secured, intelligence gathered, catastrophic breach prevented. Quote, Shadow requires purification, Xiaoyu noted with concern, amber eyes tracking void particles still being processed within Issei's essence. Corruption risk substantial after direct void extraction. Quote, manageable, Issei replied, though internal notifications suggested otherwise. The experimental procedure had introduced void contamination requiring extends. IV purification processes, system resources diverted from other functions to contain potential corruption spread. A notification confirmed priority, urgent. Void purification required. Recommended. Action. Meditation state, minimum 6 hours. Warning. Delayed purification risks permanent corruption. We should return to secure location immediately, Valeria suggested, recognizing Issei's condition despite his outward calm. The artifacts require proper examination in controlled environment, and void purification takes precedence over further operations. Issei nodded agreement, calculating optimal response to current situation. Rendezvous at primary safehouse. Artifact analysis follows purification completion. As dawn broke fully over Tokyo, 3 supernatural entities disappeared from the rooftop, Shadow, Foxfire, and Teleportation Circle, leaving no evidence of their presence. Behind them, the illuminated path facility continued emergency protocols, researchers attempting to understand the mysterious intervention that had simultaneously prevented catastrophic breach while extracting their most carefully guarded Shadow Monarch artifacts. The chess game advanced, pieces moving across board with increasing complexity. Yet the Shadow Monarch now possessed new advantages, artifacts connecting to original incarnation, intelligence regarding historical conflict patterns, and most significantly, partial documentation of the ritual that might ultimately prove key to Abaddon's defeat. Knowledge advancing alongside power, understanding developing parallel to capability. Shadow growing deeper as void loomed closer. The true confrontation approached with cosmic inevitability. Chapter 3 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.